190-152, 190-153, 190-154, and resolution number 190-164. Mr. Stitt, please read the titles of the bills and resolution.
Bill number 190152, an ordinance to adopt the capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2020 through 2025 inclusive. Bill number 190153, an ordinance to adopt the fiscal 2020 capital budget. Bill number 190154, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2020. Resolution number 190164, resolution providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia of a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2020 through 2024 and incorporating proposed changes with respect to fiscal year 2019, which is to be submitted by the Mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, the authority pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement, authorized by an ordinance of this Council, approved by the Mayor on January 3, 1992, Bill number 1563-A, by and between the City and the authority.
Thank you, Mr. Stitt. Today we continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal 2020, a capital program, and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal 2020 through fiscal 2025. Today we will hear testimony from the following city departments: Airport, Water Department, Streets Department, and the Department of Human Services. Mr. Stitt, the first person to testify is?
Shelly Cameron.
All right, thank you.
Good morning, Council President Clark and other members of Council. I'm Shelly Cameron, CEO of the City of Philadelphia's Division of Aviation, and as you all know, we're responsible for operating and maintaining Philadelphia International Airport and the Northeast Airport. You all should have a copy of our written testimony, and instead of reading verbal remarks, I just wanted to note a couple things before we started with questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay. First, let me introduce the two folks I have at the table with me. To my left, your right, is Soledad Alfaro. She's our Chief Administrative Officer. And to my right, your left, is Tracy Borda, our Chief Financial Officer. 2018, calendar year 2018, was a banner year for the Division of Aviation in Philadelphia International Airport. And I think it's important to start by noting that we saw amazing passenger growth, 7.1% in 2018. We hit 31.7 million passengers. That's almost 87,000 people a day traversing through our facility. And it was our second best year ever on record, and the first year of growth and hitting those kinds of levels in more than a decade. It wasn't just passengers where we grew, we also grew in terms of takeoffs and landings, operations for the first time again in more than 10 years. I think it was 14 years since the last time we grew in the number of airplane operations. And cargo hit its second largest year ever with more than 550,000 tons. And it grew by 20% year over year. So we had some really great operating statistics in 2018. We are also very proud that we were able to achieve those operating statistics and results with a great team and a great staff, a number of whom are in the audience with us today. We brought an army, but we have a number of members of the team, the executive team, to help with our testimony today. And behind me to my right are members of our Stars and Leads program. If they'll be waving at you from behind me, but these are folks who are in professional and leadership development training that the airport funds and puts on every year to make sure that we have the best possible employees ever. We have also hit all-time percentages for people of color in our exempt staff, and I'm sure we'll explore that later in the testimony. That's it for my quick prepared remarks, and sir, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to take them.
Thank you. Got a couple of questions. So in your testimony on page 5, you highlight the self-supporting nature of the airport.
Correct.
In terms of fees for airlines, how does Philadelphia compare to other airports? And I kind of feel like every time you go to the airport or you go online, it just seems to be a lot higher.
In
But-
terms of our cost per in-plane passenger, that's one of the industry benchmarks that is
Right.
used. We are about in the middle. And when you compare us, especially to other Northeast airports, which are comparables because they deal with snow like we do, they have muggy, hot summers like we do, we're actually one of the most cost-effective airports in the Northeast. So we're doing very well in terms of cost.
Is that a third-party analysis, or is that based on your perspective?
What happens, we are required by the FAA every year to file financial and operating statistics.
Okay.
So is every other airport, and that data is made available to us, and we are able to then calculate the cost per in-plane passenger and compare ourselves against our peers.
Okay. To some degree related to that, we are strategically placed among a group of airports, BWI, Reagan, Newark, New York City. How do we anticipate continuing to be competitive, particularly as it relates to being a hub?
Yeah, that's a really good
noticed-
question. It's a really good question, and something that we think about every day is,
Yeah.
how do we compete? We are never going to get every passenger from our catchment area to come to Philadelphia International Airport, but we strive every day to increase those numbers. The way we do that is by making sure that we are the most operationally efficient airport for both the airlines and our travelers. We are one of the easiest airports, especially when it's compared to New York, when it comes to parking and TSA wait times in the security checkpoints. Even customs processing times, even though it can be a little bit long, we are so much better than JFK and Newark. And so, we strive every day to keep track of those statistics to make sure that we're performing well, and make sure that we continue to raise the bar. We have to also keep up the pressure on maintaining our facilities. So a lot of the money that was approved by the airlines over the past, say, 5 years, a lot of it is going towards maintenance and repair type projects. So we've completed, Tracy, I can't remember how much we've completed, something like 700, almost $1 billion worth of projects. And a lot of that was for things like roof replacements, restroom upgrades, escalator and elevator rebuilds. So those are the kinds of things that will continue to make us competitive as well.
Okay. So the airport purchased some additional land recently, and I don't know, because it was on again, off again, plan for expansion. So can you tell me where we are with the long-term plans for expansion, or the conversation around an additional runway is still a part of the equation? Can you just give me an
Sure.
update on all of that?
Sure. So where we are with expanding the airport for the future is, we went through that entire study, master planning study that looked at all aspects of the airport. And we decided 3 years ago to put a pause on the new runway because it wasn't needed right now. It will be needed someday. The planning is there in place to show that where we've sited it is the best place for it to go, but we are not proceeding with that right now because the number of operations have been declining for over a decade. So our airfield, we think, is doing really well in terms of what we have to handle the traffic that we have. We just completed an extension to one of our runways, and we now have one of the longest runways on the East Coast. It's 12,000 feet. It can handle any size aircraft in any airline's fleet. We realigned taxiways so we're more efficient. So we think the airfield is in a good place right now. Getting to the land acquisition, one of the most recent pieces of land that we acquired it was formerly known as the Henderson Tract. It's 135 acres to the west of the existing airport.
Right.
That is where cargo is slated to expand.
Cargo, okay.
Yeah, we've spent the last couple of years really making sure that we understand what the demand is in this region for air cargo, and so that when we start to build and talk about developing that land, we're building the right kinds of things. We found out a couple things as a part of that study. One is that we don't capture very much of the air cargo that comes in and out of this region. We only capture something like 9%. You brought up competition in your last question. Cargo, most of it gets on a truck and goes up to New York, to JFK or Newark. We believe that the economic impact to this region by recapturing some of that air cargo is huge.
Okay.
And we think that by developing that land, we'll be able to do it. One other quick note, just because we think that the airfield is good doesn't mean that we aren't still looking at other parts of the airport. As an example, we are in the process, we'll be kicking off another master planning process to look at our terminals and our landside operations within the next couple of months. We'll be releasing an RFP and starting that process. We know that as operations have stagnated and declined over the past decade, passenger levels are starting to go up, and the number of vehicles on our roadways is going up. So we want to look at those facilities and make sure that they have the capacity to handle not just today's activity, but also into the future.
All right. One last question. Page 7 in your testimony, you have targeted $10 million increase in non-airline revenues and $12 million increase in retail beverage sales.
Yes.
Can you talk to me about the contributing factor as it relates to this increase, which sounds like a good thing?
Yes.
And just to add on to that, I just have to ask this question. There was a conversation around expanding gambling, slot machines to airports. And from your perspective, where do you think that conversation has led to or could potentially be going?
So I'll take that question first. The question about gaming in the airport. There was state legislation that passed, I want to say a year and a half ago, that would permit slot machines in the airport.
Right.
We think that that would be a really challenging activity to support, mainly because we don't have a lot of space. If you look at our terminals and our concourses, I'm not quite sure where it would be difficult to find place to put standalone slot machines. Gaming on tablets is something that could potentially
You can get rid of a couple of the burger joints, right? Those couple of slot machines. I'm just saying, it's a lot of money.
Maybe we should survey our passengers and see if they'd rather have a burger or gamble. I'm not sure, but that was one of our.
That's the primary issue.
That was one of our challenges. And then how do you police it to make sure that if it's on tablets, that people who are of age and legal to partake in those activities are the ones who are actually doing it. So we think it's challenging. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but we think it's a little bit challenging.
Right. Given the majority of people that come to our airport are not Philadelphia citizens, they're kind of pass through, and to be able to get some money, pass through money, would be, if you're into gaming,
Well, back to the first part of your question, that is why we're trying to drive as much non-airline revenue as possible. We have, so some of the reasons behind the increases that you see in the budget, we have redeveloped a number of our concessions. Terminal B with the iPads at every seat, and the restaurants embedded in the hold rooms. For those of you who've traveled through that terminal, if you haven't, we'd be happy to take you on a tour. It's really something to behold. But we've really upped the game in terms of quality of food and number of offerings. Our duty-free shops went through a complete redo while they were closed. We lost a lot of that revenue while they were being remodeled. Now that we have new contracts and they're reopened, that's part of what you see behind the growth. And then really the transportation network companies, Uber and Lyft, that's a reason for non-airline revenue growth as well.
Okay. Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
First, I just want to say, as someone who travels through the airport, occasionally, I continually see improvements there. So I think you certainly should be congratulated on that. And we're kept informed on everything that's going on down there. We see Mary Ann Mahoney every week here, so she keeps us informed and answers our questions. So we appreciate that. In your testimony, you talk about the increases you did to various destinations, both domestic and international, but you talk about still the hopes of extending our reach to Asian markets. What are particularly the challenges there?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's something that just, I was talking to Harold Epps, the Commerce Director, the other day, and we said, just the crowning achievement at the airport would really be to get that flight to Asia. We don't think that the challenge is the business case. We
I'm
think
sorry, say again? I'm sorry.
the business case is there. We think that there are plenty of passengers
Right.
traveling back and forth
Right.
between the Asian countries. Korea is the #1 destination by the numbers, followed by China. It's both Shanghai and Beijing together, and then Japan and India. But, you know, the challenge is getting, American has stated as part of their corporate philosophy that they will be focused on adding flights to Asia from Dallas-Fort Worth and LAX, not Philadelphia.
Any particular reason? Did they give you any particular reason for that? Or?
Not really,
Okay.
not a good one, but I will say that we have worked really hard to introduce Philadelphia to a number of other foreign flag carriers. Japan Airlines is an example. They are part of the One World Alliance, and if they were to start service between Tokyo and Philadelphia, that would be fantastic, because the One World
Right.
Alliance would facilitate connecting
Sure,
traffic.
sure. So it's still a work in progress? though,
It's a
yeah.
work in progress.
Okay.
It's a very large commitment of capital
Right.
for an airline to start service in a city,
I
but we
got you.
think that we're getting close.
But it does seem like, because of what you say, a lot of people travel back and forth to those countries. You hope that, you know.
You're right.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that I think is significant is that we have been building partnerships within the community, both with business partners and other nonprofits. So the Convention and Visitors Bureau, for example, is a partner of ours, and they have locations in I think 13 other countries right now, and we use their help to help us market Philadelphia as a destination. So things like that have really helped us to gain awareness, and that's got to come first before you ultimately get the business commitment.
Gotcha. And one other quick one.
Sure.
We hear about the safety factors that drones have around airports. What has Philadelphia particularly experienced, and what regulations are there on drones?
You hit on one of the things that I definitely think about all the time is, you know, how do we maintain a safe environment?
Right.
We're in the Northeast Corridor, and it's one of the busiest air travel corridors in the country. And so introducing additional commercial vehicles, and the FAA, by the way, considers drones to be commercial vehicles.
Really?
They do. And the FAA controls how they're all operated. So you asked about
What are
regulations.
they commercial about, I guess would be my question. I mean, that's not your call. I'm just wondering what. You know.
Well, you know, I think they, you know, they see them as having potential commercial applications. You know, we actually use.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, not yet at the airport, but we actually have used drones for very positive things at the airport. We used one, for example, through a surveying company to take the topography of a new piece of land so that we knew where all the things were. But the FAA has regulations. They require us to put together with local responders, because we have to actually partner. If there really was an incident, we partner with the Philadelphia Police and the firefighters. We have plans in place on what we would do should there be an event, and the technology is continuing to evolve. So we just continue to work with the FAA.
Could you send a copy of those guidelines or FAA regulations through the council president for us?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll send you a link to where you
Okay.
can go and get all
That's
of
fine.
the
That's fine.
regulations. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Taubenberger.
Council President, thank you very, very much. A couple questions. Last year, during our questioning and answering, I'd come through PHL, and I brought this up at the hearing. I did not have, as well as my fellow passengers, didn't have an overwhelming experience going through customs. And I know the wait times in many cases are really out of your control, but the people that are waiting in line don't see it that way. I mean, the answer you gave was absolutely correct. But when you're waiting in line, and I'll tell you what, there was a young woman who was waiting to go on to Chicago, getting off the American Airlines coming back from Frankfurt, Germany. She was so upset that she may miss that flight. You know, this is, I think, a great opportunity to say, hey, Philadelphia's a good place. A lot of people are coming really by through Philadelphia because of the ticketing. But they may come back as visitors, and you know we need to put our best foot forward. knowing that it is not totally under your control, has any progress been made? Because I will say this, I was in a 2-hour wait, which is a fair amount of my time in on the airline itself, and I could have flown from Philadelphia to Chicago and then gotten off there to, the amount of time that it took to go through customs. And it's also, for a lot of people, also a little bit of agita, waiting to go through customs and so on, and for a lot of reasons, waiting for a flight, waiting to get back in, and nobody likes to be in line. And also, if you need a bathroom break, if you were a single person going alone, you'd have to get out of line. That isn't right either. So I'd just like to know if any improvements have been attempted or made.
Yeah, that's a very good question. When we weren't happy either with some of the experiences that our passengers were having. So we worked with Customs and Border Protection to put in mobile passport control units in our processing area. That's it's new for us, relatively new to the industry. There are only 25 other airports that have this feature. What you can do is download an app on your phone. You don't have to pre-enroll in any kind of special program like the Global Entry program. It's free to everybody. You download the app. You put in certain information, your customs declarations.
Sure.
You walk up to a kiosk, and that's it. So for folks who are more technologically savvy or who know about it, we are starting to push that program on all of the flights that are coming into Philadelphia.
Excellent.
And we think that it's something that can save, on average, our wait times are somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40 minutes, 45 minutes on average.
Yeah.
You hit a particularly bad day and time.
Sure.
But we think that mobile passport control function can shave off around 15 minutes of that time.
Which could be critical.
We think it's really good.
Yeah, I think it's it's important. Well, something that just came to mind. If someone is a flying alone and there's no one to hold the place, is there anyone around from Philadelphia International Airport just kind of monitoring the scene, like what's I mean, really, suppose you really have to have a bathroom break and then to wait again another 2 hours while you lost your space? I mean, that's not fair.
We have customer service agents that are Division of Aviation employees
And they're kind of watching
that are up there and they're watching. So if someone were to approach them and say, look,
I'm alone,
I need a bathroom break, can you help me out? That's what they're there for, is to help passengers
well,
who
that's
need
excellent.
things.
I can't ask for more than that. That is very, very good. You had mentioned also in your testimony there's an increase in freight. Do you think that's nationwide, or is that unique to Philadelphia?
It's nationwide. We had one of the larger increases of airports, but it's nationwide, and it's mainly due to. I joke sometimes and say that it's Christmas every day at Shelly's house. It's the Amazon. It's the e-commerce part of our world.
Well, I think that's more and more. I mean, people are UPS and so on. They're looking for truck drivers. It's an opportunity for employment in this city for a lot of folks. But that is interesting.
And a lot of those packages come by air before they get on a truck to go out to your home. And so we think that is the great majority of the.
You've acquired, you said, some additional property, 130 acres, really for freight?
It's to develop cargo facilities.
Okay.
Yes. And the start was the study, so that we would understand what the demand was and more particularly what kinds of facilities were needed. So as an example, there's only one refrigerated cargo building on our airport today. It's owned by American Airlines. But when you look at the stuff that's being shipped by air, a lot of it's pharmaceuticals and perishables. More of that kind of building is going to be required in the future, and we think that is one of many opportunities, so that when we develop that land, we can actually build what people want.
And you just this new acquisition of land, was that from Delaware County or Philadelphia?
It was Delaware County, yes, Tinicum Township, yes.
Okay. And what percentage of freight is the makeup of our flights coming in? Is it a quarter? Is it a third? Is it less than?
Oh, goodness.
Approximately.
Based on landed weights, I'd have to look it up. I don't know that I know that off the top of my head.
Well, if you could get that to the council president, I would like that.
We absolutely will.
Because I think your airport is, without question, our gateway to the world. Councilman Greenlee had brought up some opportunities for some flights to Asia, and I couldn't agree more with him. Is there one airport on the East Coast that has a special niche for Asian flights, or is there none?
New York has a lot of flights, JFK, Newark, and Boston is even getting a lot of flights to Asia. So they're competing well. Again, we think that we have to make the business case first. We have to talk about Philadelphia, make sure people know where we are and what the demand is for. You have to develop those relationships, and that takes time, but we are making progress.
There is one success, I'm told. One of my staff, the person, Vincent Emanuel, is connected very strongly to the Malali, which is southern India, population community in Philadelphia. And Qatar Airlines has offered from Qatar itself a direct flight to the southern part of India. And a lot of people from our Indian community in Philadelphia who come from the Indian state of Kerala use that. And I
Yes.
think that's also opportunities.
Yeah, and that's actually a success. Qatar changed their operating time so that they would more closely align with the Indian Bank over in Doha. So by changing the time that they operated the flight, they're able to more seamlessly connect people from Philadelphia to India and back. And it was really hitting that bank over in Doha that was critical to that success.
Mr. President, I have one quick question, if you think it's going to be quick. And that is the Northeast Airport, you're putting a new runway in there, and how's that developing?
Not a new runway, but we are completely rebuilding the main runway. And
Okay.
that's a huge
And
success
that's
story
going in
as well.
progress now. Thank you very much. Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Council President. Good morning.
Good morning.
I just wanted to follow up on some information, some questions that the Council President talked about. You made reference to a new runway, and you said that's one of the longest runways now in, I didn't get the full context of the extension of runway 9R and how that impacts the airport.
So we added 1,500 feet to that runway. It's now 12,000 feet in length. What's significant about that is that when it's really hot, the larger aircraft would have to take weight penalties if they were overloaded to be able to take off and get to far away destinations. The 12,000-foot runway allows any aircraft really to go anywhere in the world, and so that makes us much more competitive.
And how does that compare to other airports around the country or around the world?
We can get you the specific lengths of other runways, but I believe there are really only two runways in the Northeast Corridor that are of that length or greater.
So it gives us a much more competitive advantage in the
That's
Northeast
right.
Corridor. You made reference to cargo as well as new air service, and I believe this new longer runway will allow that, and that's in connection with a lot of the Amazon and the other warehouse distribution. And so how is that impacting transportation at the airport?
How's the runway helping
Well,
with
the connection,
cargo?
it sounds like the runway, by extending the runway, allows us to do more, especially considering the amount of distribution centers and fulfillment centers like Amazon and others.
So the longer runway allows the planes to be heavier when they take off when it's hot.
Right, not
So
just for the heat.
that's really the biggest thing. It allows for more volume to travel through in every flight, especially in the heat of the summer.
Okay. I know in the hearings earlier in the budget cycle, we talked about some of either refundings or new money that the airport is doing. Can you just kind of give us a general overview of some of the projects some of the capital projects you anticipate for this year?
And I have my CFO here, the expert, who can address those questions.
Hi, good morning. Tracy Borda, CFO for the airport. Yes, we have probably at least another billion-plus projects that we're working on. Many of them are what Shelly referenced as a good state of repair projects. So you're talking about roofs, bathrooms, mechanical, electrical, plumbing type systems throughout the airport. We also are looking at a touch-all surfaces kind of within the airport and each of the terminals to make them, customer-friendly as much as possible, and people, good shiny places that people want to be. And then we also are working with our partner American Airlines. We really are looking at hopefully redoing their checkpoints right now. If you've been through there are two separate checkpoints, and if you've been through DE, they're a combined checkpoint. Ideally, we will have a new checkpoint to make it much easier for their passengers to use. the bows of the airport deal with what we call checked baggage inspection systems. Those systems need to be upgraded to keep up with the latest in security enhancements. And then additionally, as Shelly mentioned, we're still continuing to do work out on the airfield with regard to pavement, making sure our pavement's in good state of repair, as well as new taxiway work. So.
Thank you, Council President. I just recently learned that Ms. Porter, you are a graduate of Girls High.
I am 229.
Yes, and I know Councilmember Blondo Reynolds Brown is also a proud Girls High alumnus. Both my mother and wife are Girls High alumnus. I can't get
And
away
if I
from
could add, I met my husband at Central,
Oh,
and he's 245.
I heard the story last night. That's why I brought it up. So thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Council President. Good morning.
Good morning.
I have a few questions I wanted to ask. I know it's in your testimony. I'm just going to put it on the record that it's really clear for everybody that there is no financial cost to the city of Philadelphia to run the airport. Zero.
That is correct.
Okay. And then I just want to make sure I understand. All the terminals are in Philadelphia except Terminal A?
Except Terminal A West and a portion of Terminal A East. That's correct.
Okay. And that terminal is in Delaware County?
Yes.
And does Delaware County receive any benefits whatsoever?
Benefits from there are a number of different taxes that Delaware County receives as a result of activity within their jurisdiction on the airport, yes.
Do you have any idea what those, how much in dollars they receive from the airport?
I don't know if I have the dollars. Do you have that, Tracy?
So right now we have, in total, we pay approximately $4.1 million. It's broken up between Tinicum, Delaware County, and Interborough School District. That 4.1 million.
That's directly from the airport, and then there's, there are sales taxes and other things that would go.
I guess where I'm going with this is if I worked in Terminal A, do I pay the city wage tax?
You do if you're a City of Philadelphia employee, but other airport employees, no.
Okay. So I guess my question is, would it make sense for us, looking at the long term, to do an analysis of the revenue that Delaware County might receive, and then do an analysis that it might make sense for us to make a potential purchase from them based on a cap rate, and control it through Philadelphia, so Philadelphia has all of that revenue that comes in from city wage, use and all those other taxes that we would benefit from, and would make it cleaner for us to own all of the revenue-generating operations at the airport.
We could take a look at that, definitely, yes.
Because I'm guessing, I could be wrong, that our taxes might generate more money than the taxes that are being generated to Delaware County. And if they're only generating $4 million, you can figure out what the value is, and we could probably borrow the money to do that, maybe through the airport, and it would benefit the city of Philadelphia.
I think it's a pretty complex issue. We'd be happy to do an analysis and maybe sit with you and talk about what that would look like. We do have an agreement that Tracy referenced. It's a four-party agreement that we signed about 4 or 5 years ago that really dictate the terms of our relationship with Delaware County, Tinicum Township, the Interborough School System, and the airport. That dictates what we pay in terms of taxes. It has them helping us to acquire land for expansion. There are a number of different pieces of that agreement. So I think maybe if we were to come and talk to you about the agreement and how the different taxes work, that could be the starting point.
Right, but if you're a Delaware County resident and you're working in Terminal A, you're not paying us wage taxes.
That's right.
So
That's right.
we need to do two analyses. One, what Delaware County receives from Terminal A, and B, what would we receive from Terminal A? So this way we can make an educated decision as to how to analyze that.
Okay.
All right, the second question I had was on your, and again, this doesn't affect us financially, I'm asking you this question very differently than I'd ask anyone else in the city. You have positions in 18 that were 850 full-time civilian positions filled, and then you're budgeted for 19,942, but it looks like you're gonna fill for 857. So you have 85 jobs roughly you can't fill at the airport, according to the information?
I think we have a little bit different numbers. I'm going to ask Soledad to address staffing levels.
Sure, so as of
November, we have 792 permanent employees. And so we have a consistent number of positions. Our vacancy rate now is about 12%. So we have the largest part of our workforce is the custodial staff. And so we are consistently trying to replace folks that we lose from that unit.
We have budgeted in section 19, page 5, you've budgeted positions 972.
Our budgeted position should be 900.
900. I'm not sure where 972 is coming from.
Okay, maybe it's just a mistake in the document.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, that makes more sense at least. But actually, I was hoping it was 972. You're the only department I'm hoping it was, and I'll tell you why.
No.
It's not costing us the money. You pay for it to the airport. What I was looking for is how do we fill these jobs with Philadelphia residents so we can get more employment?
Right, yeah, so we're budgeted for 900. So we have a few separate ways that we are trying to make sure that we are clearly communicating to Philadelphia residents and drawing them in, having lots of opportunity to work for the airport. So one is we have a really robust internship program that we run every summer. Lots of council members send us interns, college interns and high school interns. One for exposure, so young people know all of the jobs we have at the airport, everything from custodial staff to accountants to the CEO. So that's one way that we are really working on workforce development. The other is we are doing a lot of outreach through Marianne and others to our high schools, especially those with CTE programs. One of the most challenging places for us, jobs for us to fill, are in the skilled trades. And that's not just an airport issue, that's a city issue, it's a national issue, that skilled trades, the folks in those positions are aging and not so many people are coming
So
in.
let me just give the big picture if I understand it
Sure,
correctly.
absolutely.
Right now, you have about 790 or so positions
Yes,
filled, but you're looking for 900.
Correct.
So there's still an opportunity for 100 to 110 positions.
Absolutely, yes.
And I guess our goal would be, can we fill them with Philadelphia residents? And because they need good jobs, and these are good jobs. So,
Yes. Well, we will hire Philadelphia residents, they're city positions, so that we will hire Philadelphia residents for those positions.
how do people in the city know these jobs are available?
So several ways. So we post them on the city job portal, and then we have a job portal at the airport, and then we do outreach through lots of various ways. We have embarked on a new program with a community agency that has reached into communities through smartphones and webinars, because the way folks have looked for jobs now has changed. So we are really trying to access and use the digital opportunities for that.
I have one comment, can I make? It's okay. I just have a suggestion. We have a great high school called Randolph. It's a great high school. Maybe there was some way that you could formulate a course or program of study. Like we have a welding class there, we have a carpentry class there. Whatever you're looking for, maybe we can connect with Randolph and you can create that course so we have a pipeline of training people right into the airport. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. And I want to just real quick follow up on what Councilman Dom just mentioned. I think also separate from partnering with the local schools, it has to be more of a robust partnership with the building trades, because oftentimes we have the young people with the talent. We just need to have the building trades have a stronger commitment to allow that pathway for the young people who are already skilled to have that opportunity to participate in the trades overall. So I just wanted to add a point of information, at least from my perspective, because we have the young people, OIC, the other program, Habitat for Humanity, but there's also another program that's in North Philadelphia where these young people learn skilled trades on a day-to-day basis. We just need to be given the opportunity to participate. But listen, we know about all things that could be improved, but I just want to start off by thanking Shelly and her team for the things that y'all have done. I want to give a special shout out to my good friend Marianne Mahoney and Kyle Schreiber for always looking out for me and making sure that I'm included on the day-to-day operations of what's taking place in the airport. And also, Solidate, I want to acknowledge you for your new promotion, but also your work and backing the work that Shelly has been doing and moving the Philadelphia International Airport forward. Since the transition under the new administration, we have definitely seen the improvements that have been taking place at the Philadelphia International Airport from a capital expansion standpoint, but also passenger growth standpoint. And so can you give us an idea of, one, we've seen significant announcements regarding places of destinations, which results in passenger growth, and what does that look like in the future? I know we've been supportive of introducing several ordinances that will look at the Philadelphia International Airport expansion, give us an idea what that looks like. And I know, Soliday, we talked about more in brief detail of the internship and workforce program that's going to be moved forward at the Philadelphia International Airport that I'm pretty excited about. If you can just elaborate on that initiative as well.
Okay, so let me start by talking about new destinations that have been added at the airport. Over the past 3 years, we've had a new airline, one every year. Icelandair first, then Aer Lingus last year, and this year we have Sun Country adding to the mix. They'll be starting service seasonally to Minneapolis. In 2019, American Airlines has already announced the addition of 7 domestic routes, new routes, and 5 international routes. The international routes are particularly exciting. We already started Edinburgh, and coming later this summer are Berlin, Dubrovnik, Bologna, Italy, and Halifax. So pretty exciting. Frontier has added 6 domestic destinations and 2 international, which is pretty cool. Montego Bay and San Juan, Puerto Rico. And Spirit has added San Juan. We now have 3 airlines serving San Juan, Puerto Rico, which provides great competition on a very popular route. And we're pretty excited about all of those.
Do you expect that growth to continue in the foreseeable future?
We do. As we look ahead in 2019, we think that we're seeing increases in the number of seats, which should, generally speaking, translate into increases in passengers of about 5% for the rest of the year. So we grew by 7% in 2018. We think another 5%-ish, 3 to 5% in 2019, so we're pretty excited. Second thing I think that you talked about was the ordinances that were introduced to help us
Capital
purchase
expansion.
land for capital expansion. And the biggest exciting piece of that is the 135 acres that was purchased in Delaware County where we will develop cargo. And that can have a huge economic impact on the region. So.
And I want to slide this in there real quick because we only have a certain amount of time. And so, and this is a nod to my council colleague, Blaunos Reynolds Brown. Shelly, talk about diversity and inclusion since you arrived in your position as CEO of the Philadelphia International Airport. What it looked like when you first got there in terms of upper level management and executives, and what it looks like now.
Thank you for that question. We've talked about this, and I'm very, very excited about the results that we've had. When I took over as CEO in early January of 2016, we had 1 person of color as an exempt
You hear that,
employee.
Blondell? 1.
We had 1. Today, there were only 8 exempt positions. We've added exempt positions. We now have 20 that are filled, with more to come. And of that 20, 9 of those 20 are filled by people of color. When you further break it down and look at what we call the C's and D's, the chiefs, the chief operating officer, chief financial officer, and the deputies, those numbers are great as well. 6 out of 13 of our C's and D's are people of color for 46%, and 54% of our C's and D's are women. So we have moved the needle significantly. We still have room to grow and to improve. I'm not satisfied yet, but I'm very pleased that we've been able to make this significant progress. And we've done that in a number of different ways that we're really excited about. In partnership with Soledad, we've really approached how we hire exempt positions very differently. We make sure that we don't put a pool of candidates in front of the hiring manager unless that pool has diversity. we do not put together hiring committees for recommendations unless that hiring committee has diverse representatives. It's a different approach, a different way of thinking, but it's a better way to look at it. And again, I think that you're seeing some of the results in the numbers. So,
And Soliday, can you finish with the internship workforce initiative moving forward?
Absolutely. Thank you. So to Councilman Dom's point, we are focused on employing City of Philadelphia residents and diversifying our workforce, to Shelly's point. So exempt staff and our civil service staff. So they were introduced earlier, stars and leads, so our existing employees, making sure that they get the development that they want and need so that they can be promoted into those exempt executive positions, and we have several examples of that as well. We are working with OHR and the City and Streets Department to build the apprenticeship program to build that bridge for citizens into the building trades that you pointed out earlier.
And just wrap up, Council President, the very robust program on the senior district, and I talked to the airport about this in terms of seeing how we can connect it to, in partnership with you, is Youth Build. We already have skilled trades, young people, on a day-to-day basis, whether it's Youth Build, whether it's the CTE programs for the school district or OIC. And at some point in time, we have to look at a lot of these industries, and beyond the airport, and making sure that we're connecting these young people with real opportunities so we can reduce the school to prison pipeline, because at the end of the day, we're still the #1 big city when it comes to poverty, and also individuals who are living in deep poverty, meaning they're only making $5,000, $500,000. So I commend you for your efforts in this area so we can grow our workforce, but most importantly, give our young people pathways out of poverty so they can go on and do something positive. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Good morning. Good morning. The Councilman Johnson and I are reading from the same sheet of music, every note. And so I'm going to be redundant and underscore a few things. One, I too want to commend you and the entire your leadership team, because it really does require that, whereby you have been intentional and strategic in coming to the numbers that you've shared with us. So that really needs to be celebrated. And you say it's different and it's better, but more importantly than that, it works. When you're intentional and strategic, you yield different outcomes. So that really needs to be lifted up, because there are department heads across the government organization that have not been intentional and strategic and have failed miserably when it comes to ensuring that their C-suite looks like the City of Philadelphia. So thank you for that. It matters, and when you're intentional and strategic, you can get it done. Hats off to you. Secondly, to Councilman Johnson's point, and Councilman Dom and I are discussing privately how we can create the loop and close the gap in linking trained young people who have the skill, have the desire, want and the will, just need the opportunity. So I think we in government need to figure out how we close that loop to move them to more than living wage jobs where they can actually feed their families in a dignified way. So we're committed to that. Putting my hat on as chair of the Environment and Sustainability, please speak to us. I read in your testimony that you have several sustainability achievements last year. Give us a brief overview of what some of those initiatives are, and that is one area I've paid attention to over the years.
So thank you for that question, and thank you for recognizing the achievement, the progress we've made.
Matters.
With it. It does matter, and again, we're not done, but more to come. So on the sustainability front, one of the things that I'd like to highlight to you that we started in the last year that I'm most excited about is we started a green roof program at one of our terminals. It's Terminal D and E, so we want to see what the feasibility is like. We've got a lot of roofs at the airport, and to see if we can make those green, which will help with water runoff and a lot of other issues. We are in the process of doing a renewable energy feasibility study for the Northeast Airport.
Okay.
Because even though we focus mostly on the international airport, the Northeast Airport is part of our system as well. And so we don't want to forget about everything that's going on up there. So we're looking at energy usage. We are doing an electrical vehicle charger installation.
Is that right?
Electrical submetering installation, ground service equipment charging station installations. We have electrical vehicles that are used today to tug the baggage carts and those
okay.
sorts of things. We want to expand that program
So
and
it
make
will
it
be
even
it's
bigger.
primarily for employees and not for guests who park their cars.
There are a couple of electrical charging stations in the parking garages as
Okay.
well, but we're trying to really move the needle on the airfield. And by putting in the charging stations, that incents the companies that run those vehicles, the airlines and the ground service handling
Yes.
companies, to invest in electrical vehicles. So those are some of the highlights. There's a lot of things that we're doing, and again, we think more to come.
So on the green roofs, my office was responsible for a green roof tax credit. So for those contractors who win the opportunity to do work out there, that's where the green roof tax credit could apply for new construction?
I think so. I'm not as savvy in that area. We'd have to
Okay.
look it up, but I think that is the way it works. Again, we're looking at it from a standpoint of water runoff and doing what's right for, we have so much concrete on the
Yes.
airport, so much concrete and asphalt, that, the more green surfaces we can add, the cooler it is, the easier it is to maintain the buildings, we think, from a heating and cooling
Sure.
standpoint, and then also it helps with the water runoff.
Let's move to professional services contracts. On page 4 of your testimony, you indicated in FY18 that of the $108 million spent on professional services contracts, only 21% or $23 million was awarded to MWDSBEs. Speak to the low participation rate, and what strategies are you implementing to attract, recruit, and award MWDSBEs in the professional services contract category?
So I am asking Kathy Padilla to come up to provide that answer, and I just want to note before she starts that we have recently promoted Kathy to a deputy level position, and we've established a diversity and inclusion deputy. That's her new title. So
Okay.
she is not just working on diversity and inclusion as it pertains to businesses that we contract with, but diversity and inclusion throughout the organization. So Kathy.
So is that to suggest that you are a part of the leadership team?
Yes, I'm now part of the senior leadership team.
Okay. So diversity and inclusion is now part of the C-suite agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Thank
good,
you.
Good morning, Councilwoman. My name
Good
is
morning.
Kathy Padilla, and I'm the Deputy Director for Diversity and Inclusion at the airport. So in looking at those numbers for the professional services portion, we have to sort of start off bigger level in that that's only for the Office of Economic Opportunity portion of the work we do. The Office of Economic Opportunity only counts for 1/3 of our diversity spend because we have the federal programs as well, and that counts for 2/3 of the spend. On the Office of Economic Opportunity portion this year, we had a one-time distortion in our participation there due to a very large contract. The shuttle bus contract was let out, and it was about $55.5 million, and the range that was set on that by the OEO was 8%. The vendor that got the contract did make that 8%.
Did or did not?
Did make that 8%.
Okay.
So, we did meet the goal that was set there, but unfortunately, that was a distortion for all of our numbers, and we don't expect that to go forward into the next year. Our fourth quarter numbers for there were 35%.
Okay. So that speaks to the discrepancy. Do you provide technical
It was
assistance?
1/3 of all of our business under the OEO that year.
Repeat that?
That contract was 1/3 of all of our business under that
Oh,
OEO
okay.
that year under professional services.
All right, the bell has rung. So in the next round, I'd be curious to learn what technical assistance you provide to former MWBEs who no longer are in the pipeline of opportunity, and how you help them get back into the consideration column for awards. Okay? But it has to be on the next round because the bell rung. Okay.
You can respond. You want to respond?
Well, I was going to say that we have a really strong capacity building program for our disadvantaged
That's the way to frame
businesses.
it, capacity building?
Yeah, we have capacity building and also making sure people are aware of the opportunities. So some of the workshops we've done over last year were how to do business at the airport for these firms, OSHA regulations and how to comply with them, how to respond to an RFP so you can get the business, what's the best way to actually position yourself for that, how to draft a concessions joint venture agreement. That was the first time we've done that, and that was very well received. And also how to find not just opportunities at the airport, but how to find opportunities with all of our transportation sister agencies, and we often partner with them to do these outreach events. One of the things that we're really excited about going forward for next year is we're going to be starting up a new program to increase capacity and professional capabilities for our small, diverse firms working in the construction area, because we always do better on the professional services than the construction end. So we're going to be partnering with the Temple Fox School of Business to bring a construction management certificate course to the airport for our small, diverse businesses. It's going to be a 10-month course. They're going to get a certificate out of it. Folks are going to learn to be more professionally competent, have an extra credential to add their resume, and of course the city and the airport is going to benefit greatly by having an increased talent pool.
Sure. That's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Make sure that members of council get that so that we can share that with constituents who may be interested in that type of opportunity as well.
Oh,
Please?
absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Council President.
Sir.
We have talked about this before, so I'd just like an update. What is the situation regarding, the parking at the airport?
Parking at the airport from a standpoint of capacity?
Capacity, facilities, contracting, what's going to happen? I know you've made efforts to improve parking and convenience, modernize facilities, that type of thing.
Yes. So the on-airport parking operation is managed by the PPA. On behalf of the airport, they, through agreement, have the right to operate, develop, and maintain the parking facilities. They have been working with us to try and define a program that would improve the structure of the parking garages, add increased enhancements in the economy lots, different routes, restriping, better routing of buses, all of those sorts of things is stuff that we're working on with them.
Does that, I imagine that only covers like, the parking lot, the parking structure. Does that have I'm sure indirect, but does it have any direct relationship to shuttle buses, that type of thing?
It does. We actually operate the shuttle buses in the economy lots that are on the airport. We have a contract that we were just talking about that actually does that part of the service. And so we, again, have to work very closely with them to make sure that the shuttle bus service matches the activity in the lots.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was down at the airport a few months back for a Women in Aviation, quote-unquote, conference. It was a great event that brought together young women from the community and many of the women in leadership roles and many women in leadership roles for work in the airport. I know this isn't the only work you engage in for women and youth in our community who are interested in a potential career path working at the airport. Can you give council a sense of some of the other engagement you have been done or what might be planned for the future?
Yes, good morning. So thank you, and thank you for attending the Women in Aviation conference. That was our first year, and we had great participation from the women of City Council. I think it's important to us, as we've stated before, to make sure that all of our young people know about the positions in the airport, but aviation has traditionally not been very diverse and definitely very male. So we have a great, number of powerful women that work at the airport, so exposing young women to those opportunities is really important to us. So we will continue with that program. It went really well this year. We also run a K-12 tour program throughout the year, so we invite schools and lots of our near neighbors, usually high school students, middle school students, to tour the airport so that they can get a sense of the opportunities that are available to them. We visit to Bartram because they're in our backyard, along with the Commerce Director and Mary Ann, who is a longtime woman working at the airport. And then we've had lots of engagement with City Council, not only Councilman Johnson, but Councilwoman Quinones Sanchez, to offer to connect us to lots of CTE programs in the high schools, which is important to us. And we've been working with OHR to help us build those bridges. So sometimes the transition is the challenging part when we have young people in programs that want to work at the airport or are excited to work at the airport, but sometimes navigating into civil service is challenging. And so we've been putting a lot of effort into that, and we're excited about the progress that we've made. And then, of course, I will have to always say the 5K run is one of the ways we reach out to our near neighbors and invite everyone to come out and participate. But for us, that money that we raise goes back to the community. It goes to the community groups as well as to Habitat for Humanity. So we're really invested in making sure that folks know about us and know about all the opportunities that there are at the airport.
Yeah, that's very good. And whenever you have special programs and exhibits, that's very good too. And Mary Ann, yes, she's been a part of us, so we all love her. Thank you, Mr. President.
Welcome, Council Lady. Chair recognizes Councilman Down.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have some questions that are on the borrowing and the capital for the airport. And so these questions revolve around maybe trying to explain how the airport borrows their monies for capital projects. How do the actual airport borrowings work? Can you just give us a brief summary?
Sure, I'll take this. Generally, we work with the city treasurer's office, just the way any other department would. However, what we would have to do is, when we're looking at future capital projects, we actually have a consultation process with our airline partners, because they have to agree and be willing to take on the future debt service payments that we would embark on. So once we have airline approval, we work with Rashia Johnson and her team and put together a plan of financing, and and would go to the market just like this, and you would for the GEO bonds.
So it's really the airlines that give you the green light to move forward.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, we don't move forward without their approvals. There's some limited opportunities for us to move forward with some smaller projects, but generally, we work together with those to figure out what we need best for our airfield and terminals.
I would just throw in, it's all part of the use and lease agreement that we have with the airlines. And so they actually have approval and disapproval rights for capital projects, but in return for that, they guarantee to cover all costs at the airport every year. So it's part of what has been negotiated with them.
They bear the financial risk.
So does the airport perform a cost-benefit analysis for the projects as required by this Chapter 22, Section 2200 of the code?
No, we do not, only because that pertains specifically to general obligation bonds, not to enterprise fund debt. So, and because we're required to get airline approval, and then they incur the financial burden of the debt that we're about to be exposed to, we don't go through that process. It's not to say that we don't take a look at some of the projects we're doing. Generally, of course, we want to see a benefit from the projects we're about to do, but not, occasionally they're not always quantifiable, because, for instance, if you're going to do a safety and security enhancement, it might be federally mandated. We just have to go and get that done. But at the end of the day, if you don't have things like that, then your airport is inoperable. So.
Let me ask you a separate question on the reimbursement. I know we get, it doesn't cost the city any money, but the fact that there's one gate in Delaware County okay, and then we're using city services, whether it's the treasurer's office or a treasurer, whatever, do we get paid, reimbursed for the costs that incur of the employee's time and so forth from the city?
Yes, yes, we do. We actually pay directly for certain departments. So we have police and fire directly down working
Right.
with us. We pay them directly. And then what we do is, the budget office can supply this, but there's a cost allocation plan. So we operate through that, and we're assigned costs from the city based
Okay.
on the cost allocation plan.
That's great. Does the airport have any long-term debt?
Yes, we do have long-term debt. So we've gone to, in fact, the last time we went to market was in 2017 with the city treasurer's office. We have a little over $1.5 billion in outstanding debt. It's in our financial statements that were produced in February.
And any idea of the rough interest rates in the long-term debt?
Well, generally, the coupon rate that's paid is at probably around about 5%. But when we did the 2017 bond deal, the all-in true interest cost that we incurred was just under 4%, about 3.9.
Who manages that portfolio?
Well, I mean, we work with the city treasurer's office and manage that portfolio. I guess I'm trying to make sure I understand, but we also have investment bankers, so for the unused funds, we work through the treasurer's office to have those funds invested until such time as we spend them.
So in 2017, you're referring to that, there was an A and B borrowing of about $692 million, roughly? And how much of that was refinancing or refunding versus new money?
I have that, hold on. Oh, sorry. So we did a couple things during that deal. We did about just about $227 million in refundings.
27?
227 million.
227.
We did $334 million in new money. And then what happens is we also have a commercial paper program, and we actually repaid $126 million of outstanding commercial paper.
Okay. In a previous hearing, it was mentioned that the city usually does capital borrowing for 2 years at a time. Was this 2017 borrowing also for 2 years?
Generally, yes, it was. And so right now we're coming back before you shortly. We're again working with the treasurer's office. We are preparing to do a new commercial paper program, as well as projections for future new money deals and refundings. We have quite a number of refunding opportunities that'll be coming up in the next 2 years. So we want to be able to act on them when the market allows us to. So we'll be seeking your approval in the next 2 months.
And the borrowings that we recently did, are these based off projected revenues for operations?
So what we do is we work closely with our planning and engineering department and plan the capital projects that we need to embark on over the next 10 years or plus. And what we do is for the projects that we're looking to take on in the coming years, we look at cash flows that we're going to need to have those projects begin. And based on the cash flow needs, we determine the new money that we will need for those projects.
So when did these revenue bonds actually get paid off?
So when we go to market, we usually do a 30-year bond deal. And so the 2017 bonds, the first payment happened in 2018, so 2048 would be the last payment on that bond deal. That is our last, that's our longest outstanding payment. But we have other bond deals that are still open, and we would be making payments on them until such time as they're done. Like the 2005s would be done in 2035.
All right, so I'm looking over your numbers. It says the airport's revenue is $463 million estimated for fiscal 2019, I believe. And it says the airport's issuance of new debt for the capital budget in fiscal year 19 is $422 million. Is that considered a high debt to revenue ratio?
No, generally what we would look at is we're going to look at the debt service, which would be the principal and interest payments that we're making, which this year are about $135 million. Compared to that revenue, you're talking about 33%, and that's about average. That's a good
average.
number. Yeah, similar to a mortgage.
Okay. I have more questions, but I'll come back on the next round. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Tauberberger.
Mr. President, thank you very much. A question really kind of on how the airport works. I mean, don't take it any other way that I want to know. For example, the new runway up in Northeast Philadelphia, why was that decided on? Why was that the project? Who said that we really needed that? And I guess the other question is, how's that funded?
Very good question. So the Northeast Airport, generally speaking, as a standalone operation, operates at a loss every year.
Correct. I'm aware
Right.
of that, yeah.
And so we look at the facilities that we own and operate, the runways being the primary facilities that we have. That runway had reached the end of its useful life. Because it's a reliever airport and not a commercial service airport, it's a distinction that the FAA makes.
Yes.
They feel that it's very important to the workings of the whole system that that reliever airport operate the way it's supposed to. So we partnered with them to provide funding for that project. So
With whom? Oh, the
the
airline?
FAA. So the FAA
okay.
is going to provide significant grant funding to rebuild that runway
Got it.
because they think that
Sure.
the Northeast Airport function is so important.
So it was really sort of their decision and said, look, this is what we need.
It was our decision that we needed to do the project. We just went to them and said, hey, what can you bring to the table
Got it.
to help us get this done? So we'll pay a portion of it with bond funds. That's the way we'll pay for it. That will then be paid off through the rates and charges that the airlines pay to operate at the international airport. The rest of the money will be a grant directly from the federal government that will be given to do that project.
And you had mentioned somewhere where the airlines, through their fees, support, I guess, Northeast Airport plus a good portion
That's
of
right.
all of the Philadelphia International Airport.
That's right. So we generate revenue at the Northeast Airport. It's not like it just is a
Yeah.
cost. We
Sure.
definitely generate revenue from tenants and landing fees and other fuel sales, all sorts
Sure.
of things at the airport. But the net loss at the Northeast Airport goes into the airfield cost center at the international airport, and that's ultimately borne by the airlines that operate there.
When airlines that land in Philadelphia want something or you need their approval for certain things, is that a weighted vote? I mean, because there's okay.
It is.
Because there's one airline, well, I can give a commercial, American Airlines, I think is above and beyond everybody else there. I mean, they have a fair amount of your gates.
There's one airline that's bigger than the others, yes.
Yeah.
American Airlines makes up about 70% of the passenger traffic and landed weights,
Okay.
approximately.
Yeah.
And the way the voting works for capital projects is it depends on whether it's an airfield project or a terminal project.
I
If
see.
it's an airfield project, all of the passenger airlines plus the cargo carriers get a vote. And it's
Okay.
proportionate based on the landed weight that they bring into the airport.
Sure.
When it's a terminal project, it's just the passenger airlines that get to vote. And again, it's proportionate to the number of passengers that they bring into the terminals.
Okay.
Yep.
That's very sufficient. I thank you very, very much for that explanation.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Dom?
Thank you again, Council President. A few more questions I'd like to ask. I noticed the airport has an $85 million line of credit with a Japanese bank. What is this line of credit used for?
So we also, as I mentioned to you earlier, we have a commercial paper program, and we have 3 banks that we have lines of credit with. Sumitomo is one of those banks that supply a line of credit to our commercial paper program.
Is that line of credit used on a daily basis?
So no, not daily necessarily. What we do is, again, when we're getting ready to bid certain contracts, again, we're looking at the cash flows needed for the capital projects. As we need cash, what we'll do is we have the funds there, we can draw down upon them as needed. And what we do is we work again with the Treasurer's Office to
And
do that.
just to add in, we don't use our lines of credit for operating funds at all. It's only for capital projects.
Okay. And my next question is, does the airport have capital reserves? And how much would they be?
Yeah, so we have both capital and operating reserves, but I'll give you, let me just go speak to that. Generally, when you have a bond, you have a sinking fund reserve for each of those bonds. So your sinking fund reserve is the highest annual debt service payment that you would make. And so we do have about $145 million in our sinking fund reserves. And then in addition to that, we have operating reserves that we've worked out through our use and lease agreement with the airlines. And one would be, one is the bond redemption and improvement account, and that is actually a coverage account. And we have, to date, we have about $25 million in that. And then we also have an operating and maintenance reserve account, and that's about $20 million in that. And then we also have a discretionary account where we accumulate funds that we've made over the years that can be used towards capital or operating costs, and there's about $83 million in that.
That's good.
Yeah.
Does the revenue generated at the airport, when you generate revenue at the airport, does that get deposited into bank accounts held by the airport or the city?
So it gets deposited into, it's the city's accounts because we're the city, but it's aviation funds only. So it's separated into an aviation fund only. We can't commingle with the general fund as an enterprise account.
But the city manages that fund?
The city does manage that fund.
And so did those, just had to ask this question, those accounts get reconciled?
Yes, they do through the treasurer's office.
And are those reconciliations up to date?
Yes, I believe they are. We work with Rashida
Okay.
and you can speak with her office directly if you need any more information on that, but
Okay.
yes.
Are there any federal accounting standards that require the airport to submit annual financial reports?
We have a couple annual financial reports. So, like the city, we perform an annual financial statements that we issue along with the city's CAFR. We also work with the FAA and have to issue a couple of reports to them regarding our passenger facility charges and any grants that we have received. In addition to that, with the FAA, they also require a bunch of different forms, which I won't get into all the numbers related to those forms, but this financial and operational activity that we have to report to them. I think that's primarily all the federal type forms that we have to submit.
Okay. One last question. The Northeast Airport, doesn't have any commercial flights, does it?
No, it does not.
So who uses the Northeast Airport?
So we have a number of corporate tenants who fly their corporate traffic in and out of the airport. There's a flight school, very small at this point. That's the majority of the traffic at the Northeast Airport right now.
I guess the reason I'm asking the question is that I'm concerned about looking down the road 10 years from now. I know that Councilman Tollenberg is concerned about this too. What's going to happen to the northeast section of the city? Because I see it from 10 years ago declining. So is there an opportunity to bolster that airport, maybe with more commercial activity that will generate revenue for the Northeast? Is there an opportunity there to expand business up there so we have more jobs? I mean, I think we have to look at that and see, because we have this asset, it's paid for by the International Airport. Would there be an opportunity to have, I don't know if there is, flights out of that airport?
Commercial flights would be challenging because we would have to invest a lot in passenger terminal buildings and parking facilities, and there's a lot of support infrastructure that would be needed to actually support commercial traffic, scheduled traffic. But we do have new corporate hangars being erected right now. Chubb is building a new corporate hangar. There is the helicopter school
Right.
or manufacturer is out of the Northeast Airport, and we think that in those areas there absolutely is an opportunity to continue to grow. Leonardo is the helicopter
Right.
manufacturer.
And is there an opportunity even with Amazon to build some sort of a facility there and use that airport?
I guess potentially. I don't know that really the runway length at the Northeast Airport would depend on what kind of aircraft Amazon would want to operate. We would also have to have enough property around to be able to build. Generally speaking, I see the International Airport as a better opportunity to do something like that should they come in and
I'm trying to
us.
figure out, how do you get more growth in every section of the city? This conversation today is about the Northeast, but how do we use that airport as a tool to grow opportunities and jobs in the Northeast?
Yeah, I think aviation-related manufacturing that would need a runway access and things like that is a real opportunity. And again, the Leonardo expansion that is happening is fantastic for that region. If we were to try and target more things like that, I think that would ensure the continued success of that airport and the area as well.
So we don't have to continue talking about it today, but I just want to put it on your to-do list to think about. How do we use that as a tool to generate opportunities of more business growth?
Sure.
In the Northeast?
Yeah, we'd be happy to talk to you more about that.
Okay.
We've got some things that are working, and
I know
we think are
Councilman
exciting.
Tollenberg will be very interested in that conversation.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Tollenberg.
Council President, thank you. The question I have, it relates to something you just brought up. You had said at the Northeast Airport, there is a small flight school. Would there be room for others, if we could get other flight schools to kind of say, hey, this is not a bad place, traffic's not bad, I mean, as far as air traffic, and we'd like to locate here. Is that a potential possibility?
It could be. The flight school that is there now is really a tenant of the fixed base operator, Atlantic Aviation. So it would be a question as to whether or not they would be able to accommodate another flight school, but it's a possibility.
Oh, you mean the fixed base operator?
Yeah.
Trenton, it's my understanding, the Trenton Airport, which is not far from Philadelphia, has some really fine flights, or has a fine flight school that is training commercial pilots. Do you think something like that in Philadelphia might work?
I think it could.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr.
Sure.
President. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. That concludes our questions for aviation. I want to thank you very much for your testimony. As always, be prepared to come back on callback date. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President.
Next up, we have water.
Yeah, is that right? Or do you want to put them here? So they're like... Okay. Yep.
Should I sit back here because
No,
Mike's...
no, you're at the table. Mike is going to sit at the rail.
I think I got a handle.
Yes. Okay. You can sit behind the
He can't see.
Well, it's still good morning for the next 2 minutes, so if we could ask everyone that is leaving to please do it quietly so we can keep going here, because we're a little behind schedule. Good morning,
Good morning.
Commissioner. I know you're the first time is speaking at this, but you know, we have your written testimony, so any summarizing would be appreciated.
Sure, in the
Thank you.
spirit of,
So-
keeping things moving,
Yes.
good morning.
And please, everybody, hearing is still going on. Thank you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Good morning,
please.
Councilman Greenlee and our remaining members. I'm Sarah Stevenson, Acting Water Commissioner, City of Philadelphia Water Department. To my left is Donna Schwartz, our Deputy Commissioner for Operations, and to my right is Melissa Labuda, Deputy Commissioner for Finance. You have our testimony. I just want to say thank you to our 2,000 plus employees who, keep the water running and the sewers flowing every day. And I think that they probably don't get recognized enough, so I want to just show my appreciation to them in public today. So, we're happy to take your questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And again, congratulations on your
Thank you.
appointment there.
Thanks.
In your testimony, you highlight the advanced metering infrastructure expansion. Does this technology help to control water rates or your department's cost? And how does it generally improve efficiencies?
So, advanced metering infrastructure, what's different about this technology than what we use currently? Right now, all meters emit a signal to indicating usage. We roll trucks every month, or we roll trucks every day, but what that results in is a monthly read for our customers. What AMI does differently is it's called a fixed network. So instead of trucks rolling by, what we'll do is have receivers on poles around the city in several dozen places, and the data will be transmitted at a much more frequent basis, so we can get reads down to the hour. So what this does, particularly for customers, is a great benefit to customers, because instead of if you have a leak, for example, if your toilet running and you don't, you don't know that necessarily till the end of the month when you all of a
Right.
sudden get a really high bill. So what this will enable is a customer can sign up for it, through a customer portal, and you can say, if my, daily usage reaches a certain threshold, I'll get a notice. So, and all that to say that it really benefits our customers to learn about things like leaks way sooner than the customer can, go and call a plumber and get that toilet fixed today versus a month from now. So
So you could actually be alerted immediately that
Yep.
if the usage goes up? Oh,
Yep.
Wow, okay. Because that could save a lot, I guess that could save a lot. The question of water rates, it might not change the rates, but it certainly changes for an individual, because sometimes, like you say, if you don't find out, if you start having the leak the second day of the month, and you
Right.
don't get the bill, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of dollars sometimes.
Yeah, I
Because
had-
we see that on occasions.
yeah, my cousin left my toilet running once over the weekend, and my bill went up by $100. So
Yeah, right,
that was
right.
just a weekend, right? So.
So,
Yeah.
so you say they could sign up for this, is that right?
Right, so part of the package will be a new customer portal, which is, I think you'll have mobile capabilities, and even on your, desktop computer, where you could sign up for different types of alerts and things like that. So, we'll be rolling that out within the next year or so, the customer portal.
Okay. One of the council president's questions, very general, but I know a lot of people would be interested in this. Where do you project water rates going over the next few years?
Where do we predict?
The
Sorry.
water rates.
Oh, water rates.
Rates,
I'm sorry, I
rates.
thought you said waterways. I
Yeah.
didn't hear you. So, I'll defer to Missy on this.
Okay.
Hi.
Please identify yourself, yeah.
Good morning, Melissa Labuda, Philadelphia
Yes.
Water Department. So as portrayed in the five-year plan, we anticipate that our costs will increase and that rates will be incrementally higher over the foreseeable future. As the rest of the city is experienced, we're having certain rising costs that are out of our control related to workforce costs and chemicals and other basic needs to run the utility.
So the things you're required to do are going to keep,
Correct, that's right,
Yeah.
to meet our continuing obligations.
so I guess that kind of leads to another question that's here is, the city's required to mitigate environmental damage through green infrastructure investments, is that right? Yeah.
We're required, the consent order agreement requires us to control combined sewer overflows through a variety of techniques, including green infrastructure and traditional infrastructure improvements.
Are they federal, that's federal requirements, or?
Yeah, Clean Water Act, yes.
Okay. All right, I'll turn to Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several, not that many, but several questions, I guess. I want to go walk through the process because we get a lot of calls and I see a lot of issues on the quality of life issues in the city. And a lot is dealing with potholes. And a lot of it then deals with water lines underneath the street that have a leak or a problem. And I guess what I'd like to find out is, what is the procedure if you get a phone call, someone calls and says there's a pothole, and this may be Mike Carroll, perfect guy. What's the procedure of how we're handling things now? And what can we do to improve the service?
So Mike Carroll, Deputy Managing Director for the Office of Transportation, Infrastructure and Sustainability. Thanks for the question, Councilman Dom. So there's a couple things we're working on. I think the general answer to the question what the procedure is, we always want to encourage people to call 311. And I know that some people feel like, it's a frustrating process to work through. We're working very hard to make that better. You can always reach out through the Streets Department website. Sometimes the road in question is a PennDOT road, so that's something that we have to sort out. Also, we want to make sure that we're addressing potholes, ditches, including plumbers' ditches and trenches appropriately, because those are all different things. The water department's work typically will involve some form of excavation. The water department will be brought in if there's some kind of a cave-in that takes place. The water department also provides inspection for plumbers' ditches. So there's a pretty strong partnership between the water department and the streets department on those types of issues. The streets department's perfectly capable of addressing the potholes on its own. We have worked very hard to upgrade the technology that we use. We have a program that we call the Guaranteed Pavement Information System We just last year completed version 2.0, and we're working very hard on version 3.0. In order for excavation to take place, you need to get a permit through the GPIS system, and that requires a level of coordination between the excavating party, whether it's the water department or the gas utility or a plumber or whoever, and the streets department, and also between the utilities themselves to make sure that they're taking advantage of opportunities to get multiple types of work done at the same time while there's a closure. So I think the news is pretty good. The water department has and is continuing to work very hard, very closely with the streets department. There's an annual ditch meeting we just had a little while back, and we bring people together at the manager level to exchange ideas and to learn about best practices. There's a quarterly meeting that takes place among these groups, and we have a monthly meeting where we bring together all the folks who are working in the right of way to make sure we're all kind of singing from the same hymn book. We're looking at specific types of problems sometimes with individual utilities, but the water department, because they're part of the cluster, they're usually right up front. And so as we're looking at different policies, for example, a moratorium on cuts in freshly paved streets, the water department's fully up to speed in what we're trying to do. We're getting feedback from them and figuring out how to make our policies strong.
Let me ask you this question, though. If a resident calls in to 311, reports a pothole, what's the next step? What happens on the city side?
So an inspector needs to go out and take a look, and that'll take place on the city maintained streets. If it's a pothole,
So give me some time frames.
that should happen within a day or two. There's sometimes a lag that takes place on the more major streets because that's something that PennDOT is responsible for. So there's an automated communication that goes out to PennDOT, and we're trying to tighten that process up. That's been a source of a lot of frustration for people because people either didn't realize that it was a state route or not, or some years back the system wasn't working properly. So we've worked to try and fix that and to make sure that there's some redundancy in the communication with PennDOT. But if we're talking about the locally maintained streets, that's going to involve a day or two for someone in the local yard. There's 6 yards throughout the city to go out and take a look. Not everything that's called in as a pothole is a pothole, though. And so sometimes people are a little frustrated because what they're looking at is a plumber's ditch or some sort of excavation, and those cannot be repaired by the streets department until the work is done, because we wouldn't want to put, a patch on top of there when somebody's still working on. So you'll find that different folks will put plates on top of these, and sometimes these plates get shifted or moved. So we're going to try and make sure that there's some level of inspection that goes along with the work. But in the city this size, we do really we need to trust and educate as much as possible the different people who are working in the right of way to use the best practices. So there's some enforcement that we have to step up to, and we're working to try and do that.
And so the people that go out, the inspectors, are they extremely knowledgeable about analyzing the problem?
Yeah, so there's a streets department inspector who has an eye on things. There's a water department inspector who has an eye on the kind of work that's going on underneath the street, and they're generally speaking people who have a lot of experience. We're always trying to add new staff, and so yes, there's a period it takes for somebody to get the skills, the knowledge in order to provide good inspection, but we feel like we've got a pretty competent workforce. It's a question of just being spread thin as much as anything else, and so we have made consistent requests to make sure that we're building up our staff and taking advantage of opportunities to combine our resources as much as possible. So I'm happy to say that the water department, on their own jobs and for work that involves their activity in the right-of-way, has been very good about reimbursing or funding some of the staff that the streets department needs in order to do work.
So if you ask the residents of the city, you would hear a different story. The residents of the city, I'm just telling you this because are infuriated that we have not done a great job in fixing these issues. If you talk to people out there, they'll say, when are you going to fix the potholes? I get emails and texts every day from people driving in their cars telling me about things, and I've never seen this before. And so that's why I'm asking these questions, because whatever we're doing, it's not working.
Well, what I'd say is that we are getting better, but the problem's getting worse because we have had a good 10-year period where we weren't doing the basic maintenance, paving the streets. And so what we started with, about 4 or 5 years ago was 30 miles of paving on a city that has 2,500 miles of street. So we've got ourselves up to about 100 miles. We're going to keep going to get to 130 miles. So those types of problems that result from, poorly maintained streets will start to abate over time. Last year we had a really bad winter. We broke our record for the number of potholes that appeared in the city. We exceeded 60,000 potholes in the city. So that's a lot of work that needs to get done. And so happy to say we did wrap up last year's potholes before this year started coming along, but this year's potholes are starting to pop up.
There's one situation where I was contacted on a Sunday morning, I think it was in South Philadelphia, the 100 block at Tasker Street, where it seemed like it took 6 weeks for us to get to the bottom of the problem between the pipe that was leaking and they kept filling it in, they kept calling the water department, kept filling it in, back and forth, and they never really took 6 or 7 weeks. And that's the frustration that I think the residents are feeling.
Yeah, those types of problems which involve laterals are like you say, they're a source of frustration, certainly for the residents. They're kind of complicated sometimes for us to work out, whether from the streets department perspective of finishing the surface or the water department's perspective of trying to make sure that the defects are addressed. It is the residents' responsibility to deal with the pipe that goes from their house to the water department's infrastructure, whether it's a service line or a sewer lateral. And not everybody has the wherewithal right away to jump on problems like that.
But a lot of times they're not even aware of it because we've told
right.
them something different.
That's right.
And the problem continues. Let me ask you this question I want to get to. Do you think it would be beneficial for us to have a licensed engineers, maybe I don't know how many we would need, 5, 10 or whatever, that are really, really top in the field, high-paying people that work for the city or independent contractors that go out and assess the problem? Because it's like this. It's like going to a doctor and the doctor not finding out what's wrong with you versus going to the specialist and the specialist identifying the problem within 2 minutes.
Well, I'd say we have extremely qualified people in the water department who can identify the problems.
This Tasker Street took 6 weeks.
I'm sorry?
The Tasker Street took 6 weeks.
Yeah,
Another one that took 2 months on South 17th Street.
Listen, I'll take any resource that you offer. I want to be clear about that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, how do we redeploy the assets we have and the monies we have to provide a much better level of service to the residents?
Yeah, and I think that you ask a legitimate question. There's constant work on trying to figure out how to improve. We tend to hear the horror stories and we don't really celebrate the successes though. So the people that are out there, like I say, are doing a great job 99.9% of the time. And we get stretched thin. So any kind of resource, whether it involves people who can kind of supplement the expertise we have, I would never, ever sneeze at that.
Have you thought of this? Because other cities have done this. Because this is such a big, hot issue for the residents. Have you thought of having a pothole hotline where we can make a commitment within X amount of time? Someone calls them back, someone goes out there, and someone fixes it?
Yeah, well, we had something that was sort of like that before. The issue is that a lot of the things that are getting called into the pothole hotline aren't potholes. And so that creates a little bit of a coordination issue in and of itself. And what we kind of figured out was they should all go to one number. So we're using 311 that way. The folks who pick up the phone on 311 have some capacity to ask questions to figure out what it is. We need to keep working on that, like I say, and so we'll be working with the other folks who work on 311 to make improvements as we're learning more about how well that works or how.
I guess what I'm saying is, whatever we're doing, I appreciate all the work that we're doing. I appreciate the successes. But in the residents' eyes, I've never seen it like I see it today.
Okay.
They don't feel that we're taking care of the issues.
Okay.
And you can ask anybody, when you drive all over the city, your car is taking a beating or whatever, or if you're on a bike, you're taking a beating. And so we need to get on top of this, and I don't think we have accomplished that yet.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate that what we're seeing is that the Band-Aids have ripped off. And that's kind of a decade-long story.
But forget that.
Yeah.
'Cause maybe we need surgery, okay?
Yeah.
What is the surgery needed to fix the problem? That's what I want to know.
Well, I think you've got good ideas. We want to keep doing the work that we're talking about. I think the coordination is key. Like I say, a lot of what we see is work that's going on because people are making improvements, and we do want to encourage that. And you know as well as I do that the pace of improvement, whether it's construction or people rehabbing their properties, has continued to pick up. And so that's a piece of this as well. So we need to make sure that everybody is working in concert together, and I think that really is going to make a difference. But I think you do have some good ideas about other steps we could take. So.
And the other question I have is streets and the water department have to be working really well together, I think, for this to work well.
That's right.
And I assume that's happening now.
Mm-hmm.
So my question then really is it the diagnosis that is the problem? Because if streets and water are working well, and we go out and diagnose exactly what the problem is, why are we not being able to take care of the problem in a faster amount of time?
Yeah, so like I say, I mean, we do that the vast majority of the time. We get to the bottom of the problem very quickly. There are certainly some painful exceptions where that hasn't been the case, and we do have to learn a little bit about that. Having the opportunity to tap additional expertise, like you say, is probably a good idea. So that's certainly something we should explore.
I think we should explore it, but also I think that if there's better coordination needed, I don't know if it's the managing director's office or whose office it is, we should take care of that and make it happen. This is a hot issue in the city.
Okay.
I mean, I can't tell you how many phone calls I get, how many people stop me on the street and say to me, "Can you fix this pothole?" I mean, I wish I had a truck. I could go out there and fix it myself.
Yeah.
I mean, someone took a picture of me on 17th Street putting up a Philadelphia Water Department horse that had fallen down because there was this huge crevice in the street because I didn't want a car to go in it.
Yeah.
And it was like that for 2 months.
So there's some good news, and you know, when the streets department's here this afternoon, they'll talk more about it. But we are ramping up to really take a big cut at the number of potholes that are out there this spring. So hopefully you'll be hearing some thanks from people.
I guess what I'm saying is this is not incremental. This has to be dramatic.
Yeah.
And what we did yesterday is not working. So we need a new program that makes dramatic change in how we're handling this issue. Because if we do the same stuff, we'll be back here next year talking about the same issues.
Understood.
Okay, thank you. I have some other, is it okay to continue? Sansom Street, the 1300 block of Sansom Street. There was a water leak, or water main break or whatever occurred back, I think, in July. And I know we've had meetings on this, and I know everyone's trying their best. Two things. One, when do we think that street will be reopened at this point?
So we're still looking at late May, early June for opening
Late
up
May?
Sansom.
So would you say by June 1st it should be open?
I don't want to commit to a specific date, but I would say late May, early June.
Because, I mean, just imagine if you had a business on that block.
Sure, no,
You're out of business. We have put these people out of business. I mean, I don't understand why it's taken 11 months to fix this problem. I mean, it takes 12 to 14 months to build a 30-story building, and it's taken us 11 months to fix this issue.
yeah, I mean, I'm certainly no expert in this, but the number of utilities at this intersection is, there are a lot.
I understand.
So that's, and it's,
But I'll tell you where I think these issues are all coming from, including the potholes, coordination and planning and expertise in those areas. And I'm just going to tell everyone the same thing. If you need to go outside, whatever funds we need to pay an outside person to help us to speed up the delivery of services to our residents, it'd be worth it. Because 11 months having that street closed, having those businesses go out of business, and it's terrible. And they've had all these commitments. It was first October to be back, then it was November. And then even the mayor came out, I think, in January and said March it'll be done. And now it's June 1st. So I think it's unacceptable. 11 months to fix that problem, to me, is unacceptable delivery of city services. So, I mean, I know you're new, and I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying I'm not blaming anybody. What I'm trying to say is constructively, how do we make this a better way of delivering services to the residents of the city? And we need to change what we've done in the past, because that's not the way we should be doing it. I have some questions I'm going to ask. The current debt of the water department, can we have an idea of the current debt of the water department?
Yes, of course. Just give me one moment, please. The total debt is around $2 billion, excluding liabilities associated with the pension program and other post-employment benefits. But revenue bonds outstanding is approximately $2 billion in principal.
$2 billion.
Yes.
And can we get the details, like the principal interest and interest rates and on that debt?
Of course, no problem.
You can send it to us.
Yes, of
And
course.
who manages that portfolio of debt?
So we work collaboratively with the Treasurer's Office in all debt issuance matters. When we issue new money debt, similar to what you heard from the airport, we work with the Treasurer's Office in identifying a money manager who will invest those proceeds until spent.
Okay. And I assume we're looking at opportunities, because rates have dropped again recently, to refinance when we can to lower our cost.
Absolutely. We just closed a refunding transaction this February. It saved our rate base several $1 million. We're always looking for opportunities to reduce costs.
I mean, recently, the 10-year Treasury bonds bills went down dramatically, so they're like 2.5 or so. So there's an opportunity now for us to save some money. You have rates below 4%.
We agree. We'll continue to work hard on
Okay.
this. Thank you.
And does the water department perform a cost-benefit analysis for all capital projects as required by Chapter 22, Section 2200 of the code? Like when we do a project, do we do a cost-benefit analysis as required?
Some of our work is difficult to put on a cost-benefit analysis because it's just required. Whether you have a main break, a sewer collapse, there's critical infrastructure that we have to replace.
I'm talking about capital projects.
They-
Those would be repairs, wouldn't they?
A main replacement or a sewer relining is also a capital project.
Okay. But on a bigger capital project, do we do the cost-benefit analysis? If we don't do it, I'm suggesting we do it.
Well, thank you. We'll begin looking at
Let
it
me
more
rephrase
closely.
the question for any department I've asked this question. If you were going to invest $1 million of your own money, you would do a cost-benefit analysis of that investment in 2 seconds. You do it for $100.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt. And some of our investments would be hard to quantify because they are investments related to a 100-year pipe in the ground. But yes, I agree with you.
Okay.
Thank you.
In 2011, the Water Department finalized the 25-year Green City Clean Waters Plan as part of a consent order and agreement with the EPA. That was in 2011. In 2016, the Water Department issued a 5-year report which showed the city actually surpassing its initial goals. That's a good thing. How are we doing with progress towards the 10-year goals, which we need to meet by 2021?
So we are currently on track to meet our 10-year goal, and I believe as of March, we had over 1,100 greened acres, was the last
That's great.
stat I
That's
saw.
good.
Yep.
That's good. In your budget comments on page 4 of your budget detail, it shows an increase of $231,300. It says due to an estimated separation cost for drop employees. This is page 4. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. We have a lot of employees that are in the DROP program, and we're anticipating significant retirements in the upcoming year. And when we work on our budget tally, we try to evaluate the cost of what those payments will represent to our employees upon their retirement, and those costs are increasing due to accelerated retirements.
So those costs for the drop program come out of the Water Department budget?
Yes, we pay for our own. We're an enterprise fund, so all of our costs are ring-fenced from the general fund. So drop costs or payments.
That's your
to-
actual drop cost, $231,000.
Yes, that's what we believe our drop payments will be.
Okay. And also on page 4 of your budget detail, it shows a decrease of $2,776,000 in energy prices. It's great we're saving money, but can you explain how that occurred?
Sure. We are part of the city's energy office, and we benefit from the hedging program that the energy office puts in place. They're probably best positioned to give you the details, but we've seen budget certainty and incremental savings related to the efforts that they've taken to date.
All right, and on a positive note, besides other positive things, I think the Water Department and the streets did a good job, I know, on 18th Street and other streets I've seen. So it's not all, as you say, negative, but I will say my overall goal of this today is that we need to do a dramatically better job in fixing these potholes and making the city's services better for the residents, the lifestyle. I mean, it's the quality of life issues for people that I've never seen it like this. So, and I know we're an old infrastructure, I know we have piping from the 1800s in our streets, but still, I think we need to figure out a better way to do it. And if we can't do small changes, you got to do a dramatic change here. So I'm happy to work with both departments.
Thank you. Yep.
But we need to figure that out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. No further questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you for
Thank you.
coming. Next department is Streets Department.
Do have a plan review for any project.
All right, we'll resume in like 2 minutes. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Commissioner, you know how this works. We have your written testimony. Is there anything
Thank you,
you'd like
sir.
to say, and then we'll get to questions.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Council President Clark, Council President Chairman Greenlee, and members of City Council. I'm Carlton Williams, Streets Commissioner. Joining me today are Keith Warren, Deputy Commissioner for Sanitation, and Richard Montanez, Deputy Commissioner for Transportation, Chris Newman, Deputy Commissioner for Administration. I am pleased to provide testimony on Streets' Fiscal Year 2020 operating budget. The Streets Department is very proud of multiple initiatives we have embarked on as part of our strategic zero waste and Vision Zero efforts. A look at our most recent 5-year plan shows that we are engaged in many of the varied programs in pursuit of a highly ambitious goal regarding litter reduction, waste diversion, the expansion of roadway resurfacing capacity, and the continued actualization of multimodal traffic calming and safety. The department continues to improve the cost efficiency and effectiveness of the city's waste management operations through strategic planning and technology. Utilizing the city's litter index and GPS technology, the department is establishing an entirely new way to efficiently plan and deploy operations. We are also actively working on a new and transformative waste management contract and implement a new innovative recycling processing contract featuring an extended initial term to ensure most cost stability and protection against constantly varying long-term market conditions in a very challenging global recycling market. In response to these global conditions, a new outreach and marketing campaign is also being rolled out intended to maximize the quality and the quantity of materials in our recycling stream. Streets is actively increasing enforcement efforts to combat illegal trash dumping by installing new surveillance cameras targeted in areas known for illegal dumping activity. A total of 100 new cameras will be installed by the end of this fiscal year alone. And we are incredibly excited about a proposed significant investment in street cleaning, which will allow us to deploy and strategically focus on cleaning efforts in those neighborhoods most in need. On the transportation side, Streets is maintaining our focus on Vision Zero strategic objectives as outlined within the city's Connect Transportation Plan to establish and operationalize efforts targeted to significantly improve traffic safety, including significant infrastructure improvements to the city's streets network. Primary attention continues to be given to the high injury streets network, representing the streets corridors that experience the most traffic deaths and severe injuries. We are also making incredible progress on achieving a state of good repair to our streets and our roadways as we look to reach over 100 miles of resurfacing next fiscal year and 131 miles by fiscal year 2023. In addition, a newly augmented grants and projects management staff hired this year will allow the department to further maximize the effectiveness and efficiency of grant funds and results in completion of increasingly high volume of transportation, public works, construction, and design projects, many of which are focused on in high crime and low income areas of the city where improvements are not much needed. The Streets Department and its employees look forward to providing yet another year of exemplary service as we fulfill our mission of clean, green, and safe streets. Our budget request today allows for us to continue to pursue this objective. We therefore request your favorable consideration of this budget request, and we thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. The deputy staff and I are happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good afternoon, I'm sorry. I'm actually going to come back. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Commissioner and staff there. I know you had a briefing, I think it was last week, about the waste management contract,
Yes.
but maybe you just explain for the record. I know that the contract went up about $12 million for fiscal year 20.
Yes.
But you had an explanation as to why that occurred. Can you just put that on the record, why it went up $12 million?
Yes, well, there are several factors. I think it's a combination of both. I think it's a combination of the request was both for recycling and for solid waste. Our recycling contract is expected to dramatically increase in the next fiscal year due to the crisis that we're experiencing globally from the new regulations and sanctions that was put in China. China was in fact one of the largest imports of our domestic recycling products that we import when they put standards for contamination rates at 0.5%, which is a standard that we don't believe any current municipality can meet. It dramatically increased costs. So now we have to look for new markets to distribute the material, which ultimately led to increases in our contracts. The structure of the contract will also change. In the past, it usually was a 1 year plus 3 renewable option years. Now it's a longer term because processors want to guarantee a longer term rate because of the volatility of the market. And so we're going to be paying a little bit more to recycle, but we think it's very important. We'll continue to do so, and hopefully in the future, domestic markets will open up where we'll be seeing favorable returns on our investment for the materials that we produce curbside. I also want to mention that the interim agreement in which we were kind of forced into taking half of our material to a waste-to-energy facility will end by the end of this month. We'll be returning 100% of our material back to processing our material at a material recovery facility.
So are you saying that 100% of our waste gets reborn again, basically, or gets, or is it dumped somewhere, or some of it dumped in another location?
Well, currently, right now, 50% of our waste is being sent to a waste-to-energy facility in Chester. In the past, 100% of our materials get recycled at a processing facility. There is a portion of that that is contaminated that gets taken out, but most of it gets processed and then sold on the open market. So what I'm saying is 100% of that material will now return to that material recovery facility, and contamination will be our focus to try to reduce the amount of residuals that get taken out of the stream, so we can process as much of that material as possible.
Does that mean, I'm trying to make sure I understand, does that mean that 100% of our waste is recycled?
No, that means 100% of the things that we collect curbside will get sent to a processing facility that will process as much as it can minus the contamination.
Okay. And where does our waste that's not recyclable typically go?
Well, we have, currently we have 2 vendors that accept our material. The waste-to-energy, aforementioned waste-to-energy facility in Chester takes some of our material, and Waste Management takes the other portion of it.
Where do they take it to, though?
They take it to their disposal facilities. One is a waste-to-energy facility where it's transformed back into electricity and put on back on the grid. The other actually uses a spec fuel, which changes it into an alternative fuel to be sold, and then the remaining portion is actually either waste-to-energy at their facility at Waste Management or landfill.
And is there any impact by having increased recycling costs that we've had an ability to secure recycling performance grants from the state under Act 101, Section 904?
So we will know the impact of that in this year's grant, and traditionally in the past, we've gotten about 1.5 million, which has been the highest of the state because we produce the most. We don't think it will have that much of an impact given the interim. It's only been a couple of months that this process was in place, and we don't think it will have that significant impact on our ability to secure future grants because we've always been the highest, and it's based on the ratio of who produces the most, who gets the most. And we've maximized every year. In fact, we've not been given as much as we probably should have, given the amount of volume that we generate, because I guess the state wants to fairly distribute it to other municipalities across Pennsylvania.
Let me ask you another question, because we had 2 or 3 calls in our office recently. Some article came out the other day. I don't know if you're aware of this. It was talking about running a gas-powered leaf blower. You've seen this article? For half an hour. It says it generates about the same carbon emissions as driving a 3-ton pickup truck from Philadelphia to Costa Rica.
I am aware of that. We actually did a press conference yesterday to announce the mechanical leaf program. We are being very sensitive to the environmental concerns posed by groups who oppose us using this method. The issue is with us is that we have to efficiently and effectively remove trash off streets. At the press conference yesterday, I was able to effectively demonstrate why mechanical sweeping alone won't be effective. There was trash strewn lots on sidewalks, up against fenceways. It was very difficult for mechanical brooms. In fact, it's impossible because we don't drive on sidewalks. Someone has to get that litter into the street for it to be collected. And for us to do that much amount of streets in the given time that we have to use the most effective method. I will tell you also, Councilman, we also pilot and we're still looking at other systems that are out there. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, we looked at a power washing system that was connected to a sweeper that actually water washed the debris into the sweeper, to the roadway so that the sweeper can collect it. That process was extremely slow, which means that it would take us a tremendous amount of time to just complete a routed area. But we are open to changes. And so this is a pilot. We want to stress that. We want people to understand that we're looking at alternative ways, and the last thing we want to do is violate or create health hazards for any individuals who are affected in that community. So we're going to continue to work hard at it. Right now, we're going to continue to try this pilot. If it does have those health effects, then we'll have to, circle the wagons and reconsider another option. But right now, this is the most effective method that we think that we could utilize in order to do a great job for the citizens of Philadelphia.
But is that a true statement? Same carbon emissions as driving a 3-ton pickup truck?
So I don't know that particularly. That's one of the things that we're trying to verify, the information that is coming in right now for those who oppose this process.
That would be a negative, for the city. Yeah.
Yes.
Last question. It's on potholes. And it's really not, it's just a comment. And, sometimes perception's reality. Because I looked in your form, it says 90% of our potholes are filled within, I think you said 3 days. But I think we need to do something dramatically different in this area that addresses the issue, because it's a number one, it's up there as one of the top 5, I'd say, complaints we get from residents about the condition of our streets. And I realized there was all these other issues of what happened in the past, but that they don't care about what happened in the past. They only care about when they're driving their car, and it's like a roller coaster ride for them on the streets. What are we doing to fix that problem?
Sure. So I think the administration made a significant investment to help us address the issue with potholes. The deteriorating streets from, I want to say, over a decade of neglect and less investment in the streets department's paving program caused us to be in this condition today. And I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm just explaining why we're here today. The issue of us moving forward is that we have to get on a resurfacing program that eliminates deteriorating streets the way that we're seeing them. The harsh winter conditions that we've had over the past couple of years, some other counties and municipalities in the northeastern region have even declared states of emergencies in their jurisdictions, and we're not there yet, but I'm just letting you know the magnitude of the problem is just not for Philadelphia, but we still have to make a concerted effort to make the investment. Last year, we added a second paving crew, and I want to, for the record, say that a paving crew is not just 2 or more people, it's 40 people. That second paving crew allows us to go from 75 miles the year before over 100 miles this year, and we're adding a third paving crew to get us to 131 miles, which we consider a state of good repair. That in itself will decrease the amount of potholes that you're seeing around in the streets when we get on a permanent replacement schedule. But it's going to take some time to get there, so we're still going to have some pain points where we're going to have to field complaints. And we have crews that actually, we notched up our maintenance and response team. We're out on weekends now. We're going out to neighborhoods. We're repairing potholes more than we've had in the years past by the additional people that we've put on, and we're responding back, as you noted earlier, with our response times.
But I mean, I think if we had a coordinated effort and we met this problem head on, and I'm going to go back to what I asked earlier, a pothole hotline, okay, where even the mayor of the administration makes this announcement that we're going to address things within 48 hours, we're going to have this fixed, and we accept the issue, we admit it's not in good condition, but we also say we're going to do a better job. I think that promotion, that publicity, and the fact that we then follow through on it would go a long way in the eyes of the residents.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing. I know whenever we call you, you're very responsive, and I appreciate that. And your department is doing a very good job from what we can see. But we just want to make the potholes go away.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Mr.
it.
President.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Councilman, you talked about this issue about environmentally sound ways of moving trash off the street, on the sidewalk in particular. I think the most environmentally sound way of doing that is for people to stop throwing trash on the street and on the sidewalk.
I agree 100%, Council President.
It's a whole lot
Thank you for that
easier and a
comment.
whole lot more environmentally sound. So at the end of the day, people in the city need to stop, and I'm going to say it, people need to stop being pigs, right?
That's absolutely correct.
Because we go to all these other municipalities across the country, and you do not see what you see in the city of Philadelphia. And that's really problematic. It's embarrassing. In the store, I told this story not too long ago about the gentleman saw me in the store, and he was from New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And he was saying, I saw you on TV, blah, blah, blah. He said, can I ask you a question, please? Yeah. He said, why is the city of Philadelphia so dirty? And, I had nothing to say, And he even talked about trash being on top of the snow, right? And I think it was very embarrassing. So we got to figure this out as citizens, just figure out. I'll call on Councilman Greenlee, and then I wanted to follow up on that issue. Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon. Real quick, on the same lines, I saw the story in the paper about your pilot program with street cleaning. Now, the plan is, because I know this got quite controversial a few years ago about moving the cars, and you said I think your words were you're going to urge people to move the cars, but
Correct.
at this point there won't be ticketing, is that basically?
Those routes are not posted, so no, there won't be any
No, okay.
enforcement behind it in terms of, official enforcement in terms of ticketing. That's
Okay.
correct.
And I get that because parking, I certainly live in one where parking is completely challenged. But do you really think that can, how do you see that working? I guess that's the purpose of the pilot, but how do you see that working as far as effectiveness of cleaning? If people don't, because I would guess, unfortunately, if there's just an urging, most people aren't going to move their cars, is my guess. Maybe
Right.
I'm wrong, but, you know.
Right. So let me clarify also, we still have some commercial routes posted, but in residential communities,
Right,
we're not
right.
asking this. I wanted to
Right.
clarify that. But, so we went out to certain neighborhoods. We certainly tested some blocks outside of the pilot areas.
Okay.
We've been getting an overwhelmingly positive response from residents saying,
Okay.
thank God they're here.
That's good.
We didn't think that, we would see people come through and actually clean our block, and we're sorry that it got in this condition, but we're happy to see, the work. They was actually very impressed how hard sanitation, and I got to give a big shout out to the guys who are out there doing that work. They worked extremely hard, and it was an extremely effective process. We were out of those blocks in about 15 minutes that we serviced, and they did a very thorough job. And again, I have to stress, litter just doesn't accumulate on curb lines where brooms can collect it.
No, I got you.
This was on streets, on sidewalks right next to
Right.
it. And then some of the debris was so large that, a broom wouldn't be effective. So those guys are out there doing more than just blowing it out from under cars. They're blowing it off sidewalks. They're picking up debris that's extremely heavy for the mechanical equipment, and they're leaving the block very detailed clean. And again, I want to just stress the importance of making sure that we have to do more than just the curb lines. We have to look at the sidewalks, the lots, and everything else that's associated with
No,
litter.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think sanitation department does a very good job. I know people, for some reason, want to pick on them because neighbors, as council president said, can't seem to stop throwing stuff in the street,
Correct.
which
Yep.
I don't get either. But in any event, one other question on another issue, dumpsters, okay? Hope I have this right because I've been back and forth with L&I on this. I'll just give an example because we've heard about this. Drury Lane, where McGillen's is,
Yep.
there's got to be 20, 25 dumpsters on there. And from what I understand, the dumpsters, you're only supposed to have dumpsters on this block that you're on, correct? I mean, and it can't be 20, there's not that many businesses on Drury Lane. So I use that as an example, and I think there's other of these side streets. Now, as far as the enforcement, is that the streets department that, as far as take action against those dumpsters?
The condition of the dumpsters, the enforcement is the streets department. That's correct.
Enforcement, but also, should they be there to start with, I guess?
So that's a combination of streets and L&I, our right-of-way unit approves the location. Pat
Okay.
O'Donnell is here today. You can talk a little bit more about that process. But when it comes down to the trash and the cleanliness of
Okay.
where those dumpsters are, how they look and the conditions and who's responsible, that falls on sanitation. So Deputy Commissioner Keith Warren can also comment on the work that we've been doing to try to address that as well.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Do you want to talk about the right-of-way and placement as well?
I guess it's both. It's,
Okay.
certainly the condition of the dumpster, condition of the dumpster, but also, should that dumpster even be there to start with, is the question, Because even if it's maintained, you got this row of dumpsters there, and are they all supposed to be there is the question.
Good afternoon, Council.
Yes,
Keith
sir.
Warren, Deputy Commissioner, Streets for Sanitation. As far as the enforcement and condition of dumpsters, we over there want to have launched an intensive campaign to audit all dumpsters, the owners of the dumpsters, and the condition of all the dumpsters in Center City. In conjunction with L&I, we have been tagging dumpsters, contacting haulers, asking them to replace damaged dumpsters, haulers and users, and we conducted an audit of all the dumpsters for placement in conjunction with right-of-way. Some of the streets in Center City were historically designated to store dumpsters, which is an issue that we are running into, but we are evaluating a
Now, you
process.
say historically designated by whom?
That is the $100,000 question.
Okay.
It's
Because I think we passed a law a few years ago. I remember former Councilman Green put a law in that put some regulations on that. And I thought one of them was that you could only have, the dumpster could only be on the block where your business is.
so the current state of that, I believe that is correct. Mr. O'Donnell could speak
Okay.
more to that, but there are
some streets, a few streets in Center City where businesses face both sides of the street,
Okay.
and the dumpsters ended up in those streets. But we are now conducting an audit to try to straighten it all out.
Okay, all right. Pat, you want to add?
Good afternoon, Councilman. My name is Pat O'Donnell, Director of Transportation for the Streets Department. Regarding the location of those dumpsters within the public right-of-way, the right-of-way inspectors determine, they'll receive an application for the placement of a dumpster to be placed within the right-of-way. They'll go out, they'll identify if it's feasible or not to have that dumpster placed within the right-of-way at that location. But prior to us even receiving those applications, licenses and inspections will make a determination if the dumpster or the refuge cannot be contained within the property. We've seen a dramatic decline in applications for the dumpsters to be placed within the right-of-way since L&I has implemented this change.
You say decline? Decline, is that what you said?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Those that are out there that are not in front of the property, they're there illegally. If
Okay.
they do not have an RFID tag, Deputy
Right.
Commissioner Warren, sweep officers will be able to issue CVN for the illegal placement of the dumpster at that point.
And if a CVN is issued, is there a point where the dumpster is removed if the owner doesn't remove it?
Yes, if we determine that a dumpster is in an illegal location, we then place a sticker on the dumpster notifying the user and the hauler that they have 30 days to remove it from the right-of-way or face confiscation.
Okay. Because I raise that because there's like a restaurant on that block who are having challenges dealing with the issue that Councilman Don brought up with the water department with the damage in the neighborhood. And then they said, and then we got like these 25, 30 dumpsters that, are, all over the place. So, all right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Mr. Carlton Williams and his leadership under the Streets Department, as well as Keith Warren, who I text on a regular basis regarding addressing quality of life issues around illegal dumping and cleaning our streets, as well as Steve Lorenz and also Mr. Nick Epizito, who's working with us in Southwest Philadelphia on the Vision Zero Waste initiative. And so just a couple things. Give us an idea of the $200 million commitment that the mayor is proposing regarding paving throughout the city of Philadelphia. What's it going to look like? Also, our efforts around combating illegal dumping. Particularly, I know we put up cameras, but how are we going to go about monitoring those cameras to make sure that when individuals do dump, we're working with the Philadelphia Police Department and the detectives unit to actually focus on banning these guys from doing work here in the city of Philadelphia, like forever. And then just overall, our direction in terms of cleaning and greening the city of Philadelphia. I know we kicked off the mechanical sweeping program yesterday in Southwest Philadelphia, and a lot of my constituents were very excited about what's coming. And so just go on a record and just give us an idea of some of the things that you are working on as it relates to cleaning and greening the city of Philadelphia.
Great. Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate all your support that you've given to the department in the past. Certainly look forward to continue our working relationship. The first thing in terms of street paving, the $200 million investment over the 5 years is a direct investment in street improvements in terms of resurfacing. In the past, as I mentioned earlier to Councilman Dom, we were severely underfunded with one paving crew, and that was only able, as of 2015, only able to do 33 miles per year. That's way under what the standard of care for our streets are, and that's why we're in the conditions where we are today. Our goal is to get to 131 miles per year over the next 5 years, and we get there by adding an additional paving crew. So we already have two We added one last year, and we're slowly adding one over the next year and a half to get to 3. Once we get to that point, we can increase the actual number of miles that we pave each year, which will improve our conditions of our streets and certainly reduce the amount of defects that everyone is experiencing and very concerned about. So I think that is in itself is going to be a huge investment. The department is also working very closely with Otis and Vision Zero to ensure not only are we paving streets, but we're including bike lanes, and we're making sure that we're putting traffic calming measures in. We're doing line striping, and we're certainly working with the community and residents to ensure that they are aware of some of the conditions. Our goal also in terms of the department is to put out a 3-year paving plan. We put one out in advance early this year. The second 2 years will be coming out this summer, and that will give people advance notice of the intentions of where we expect to pave throughout the year. And this is helpful for a number of reasons. So we get a lot of complaints about utility companies. I know this is
That's what I wanted to
big
ask.
concern
Yes.
about for the council president and all the council members of how you coordinating with other departments to ensure that once you pave a street, that it doesn't get torn up within the next month, the next week, the next couple of months. So a couple of things. Number one, putting this paving plan out allows us to coordinate with both the water department, the gas works, and other utilities about their major capital investments and programs and projects, so that if there's any conflicts that we can work them out before a street is paved. The second thing is if there's a private developer or any other utility company that comes in and does disrupt the street, once it's paved within a 5-year period, there's a law and a moratorium that we want to put in place that will require to return the street and completely pave the street back in that condition. So I think those are the things that we're doing internally to try to hold people accountable and try to have better coordination to ensure that our streets stay and maintain in a state of good repair. So that was the paving question. Did you have any more before we went back onto streets enforcement? In terms of sanitation? Okay, great. So the camera program, as you know, has been very effective in terms of preventing dumping in the first couple of months.
Quick question in terms of point of information. Now, Council President and myself, we were down at the Divic Center in South Philadelphia, right?
Uh-huh.
Did we pull up some of these same cameras that's connected to the Streets Department at the Divic Center in South Philadelphia?
Yeah, my understanding that the cameras are interchangeable with the police department and the streets department for sure.
That is correct, Council President, yes. So they're the same camera. We purchased additional cameras to go onto that network where we have access to.
So where's the hub that actually monitors these cameras, and what's the hours in which they're being monitored?
So there's multiple locations. The Divic is the first major one where the official enforcement action is actually implemented. But internally in streets, we also have monitors that we have in our offices. We have one at the TOC, which is our Traffic Operations Center. We're building another one at our new sanitation center located on Delaware Avenue and Wheat Chief. I believe that's Area 5. So we'll have actually trained personnel, trained by members of the Divic, to do security and monitoring. Now, that would only be for an 8-hour period during a regular workday. So we don't have 24-hour surveillance. But what we do have is the capability to record and get information and then use that recording as an evidence against those who illegally dump in our city. I think we have about 7 or 8 cases right now that we've caught people actually in some well-known locations that we've turned over to the police department. Nick Esposito from the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet effectively worked with the police department to secure an environmental detective who specifically works directly on illegally dumped cases. So I think that is a huge progress for us in terms of now we have someone actually we can turn this over to have enforcement action, which I think was part of the problem in the past.
Do you think contractors who are caught illegally dumping should be banned from doing business with the city of Philadelphia?
Absolutely, if they're caught frequently. I mean, there's levels to it. So if we have a frequent flyer who continuously dumps and disobeys and disregards the laws, they should not be doing business in the city of Philadelphia. If we have a one-time dumper who thought he could get away with it, I think the penalty should be so severe enough that he would think twice about doing it again. So that means fines, increased fines, and community service and remediation payments to the city for having to clean the mess up.
You know, I'm exceeding my time. I'm just going to push for one last, if the council president will give me a little latitude, and just one last component. The Future Track program, how many young people are participating? How many alleyways are being cleaned? What's the status of the program? Because, you know, we talk about the issue of gun violence and poverty here in the city of Philadelphia. I think that was just such an awesome program to expand and get more young people involved as an alternative to them standing on the corner. And on a day-to-day basis, when I go to community meetings, one of the biggest issues that we deal with is alleyways, right, that are filled with debris from contractors, right? And residents say, at the end of the day, if a fire shall happen and they need to get out their alleyway, and I'm a prime example. One time when I was a kid, my mom cut her foot, right, and we were in the house, right, and we had to go to the hospital, right, and during these times, Council Pres, we lock the door with a key in the house, right, so you need the key to get out the house, right, so we had to go through the alleyway, right, and so we got through it, right, this was when I was a kid, like the late 70s, like 78, but if that happens today, right, you're not getting out that alleyway because contractors, 9 times out of 10 is contractors and trifling neighbors that just throw trash bags and stuff in the alleyway. But neighbors are told they're responsible for the property up to the middle of the alleyway line. And so I think, you know, that law should be changed. I think the city of Philadelphia should find ways to clean alleyways. But nevertheless, Future Track is a program that has been doing it while we replace the light bulbs. What's the status, and can we expand it? And just give me an update.
So, yeah, Chris Newman helps administers the Future Track program. In the past, our focus was solely dedicated to alleyways, and it was a very effective program in terms of clearing alleys. The program changed a somewhat because we were able to do more with the members and give them an opportunity to apply for city government. And so we've opened up kind of their job description to include some transportation. So their focus has not just been on alleyways, although they still do beautification work for the city of Philadelphia. They've also been part of the transportation vision, learning those skills so that they can either get into highway or sanitation for full-time jobs. And Chris can give you the numbers of the number of people that we've actually hired in the city of Philadelphia through Future Track program. And we, of course, we're limited to the amount of participants that we can bring in every year. Obviously, we would love to bring in as many people as possible. But
why are we limited? Is it resources or capacity?
It's a resource limitation in terms of the funding that we use our funding sources, but we certainly think it's an effective program. It's a great way to kind of pre-screen your applicants about who you hire. So it's actually a test trial period to give them an opportunity to get into city government, something that wasn't available to them in the past. But Chris, can you give them the numbers real quickly?
Chris Newman, Deputy Commissioner for Administration. Councilman, we've hired 25 people directly into civil service positions so far over the last few years. We expect to hire 10 more going into the next fiscal year. What's nice about the Future Track program now is it actually provides a direct path into civil service. So most of the folks that go through these tracks don't even have to take a civil service exam. The fact that they're successfully going through our program qualifies them to get onto a list. So currently for this fiscal year, we're actually going to have 3 different tracks. One is going to be for field investigators, which would be directly pathing into our sweeps program. Another one would be for roadway maintenance, so those folks actually go into roadway repair and resurfacing. And the other one is an engineering aid trainee path, where they would go in and do traffic investigations and traffic assessment type work.
Okay, that's all I have. Again, I want to thank Streets Commissioner Carlton Williams and his deputy Keith Warren and your team. And I see Mike Carroll over there. Thank you, Mike, for helping me out with 15th and Locust Street repaving issues that we have to address. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Council President, for your latitude.
Thank you, Councilman. Like Councilman Johnson, I'd like to thank you guys, and actually Councilman Dom, for your level of responsiveness. We were out the other day up on Old York Road looking at some issues up there, and I want to thank all of you for not only being responsive, the drop of the hat out in neighborhoods, but coming to community meetings. So that means a lot to us. As I've always said, all due respect to everybody else, but streets in L&I from my perspective, has been the most responsive departments as
Thank
it
you,
relates
sir.
to the things we need to do.
Appreciate it, Council President.
I want to ask you a couple of questions. See, we dealt with the issue about the street sweeping, but I do want to follow up to some degree. And maybe you can or cannot answer this question. So, in a lot of neighborhoods, you know, you get to travel around, and there seems to be a direct relationship in the trail of debris/trash, particularly paper, plastic bags, and other types of candy wrappers and all of that, to the corner store. And again, I preference my question and comments by, at the end of the day, people need to stop littering. Bottom line, right? That will resolve a lot of problems. But there is this reality in the city of Philadelphia, and not necessarily a whole lot of different places, where people come out of the store and unwrap, do whatever, throw the stuff on the street. So what is the policy around stores? Because, you know, you talk to a lot of store owners, and they say they don't necessarily like the fact that there's a lot of debris around the store. Having trash receptacles on the sidewalk of the store, is that allowed?
It's actually Keith Warren, Deputy Commissioner for Sanitation. It's actually a requirement that if you're selling food, that you have a trash container out during the hours that you're open.
Selling food?
Right.
All right. Is that enforced?
I would like to say yes.
Kind of hesitated. That was a pretty weak yes.
And I'll preface to say not as much as it should be,
Not as
Council
much as it should be,
President.
and
So that is an issue, yeah.
Yeah, we're covering the whole city with a small group of people, but as much as we can, we enforce it.
All right. So do we encourage people, if you see, I mean, I don't like to, you know, pick on any particular industry, but that's the problem. They got these stores, and they're all over the place, all over the city, and it's just debris all over the place. And I'm telling you, it's like close to, and you all see it, to the store. So should that be a 311 issue if people see non-compliance of issues relating to debris? And not only that, people putting out debris on the wrong day, all of the things associated. At some point, people need to have certain levels of enforcement and encouragement. I can recall we got very aggressive in recycling. We implemented that, and I gave Michael Nutter credit because nobody believed that we were going to be able to do recycling, and they banged the citizens into submission. Actually, me, because first it's all should go on one thing, right? And recycling works from that perspective. So should we have a similar approach to ensuring that this whole littering issue gets resolved?
Yeah, I think you made a good point about targeting it where the source of the trash is coming from, and you mentioned how you see candy wrappers and food wrappings that's just strewn all over the street, and you can almost trace it back to the location.
Right.
So I think there's certainly validity in that in terms of holding them accountable and making sure they're at least doing their part to offer, you know, a waste receptacle outside of their establishment during their operating hours, and to clean up in front of their businesses because they're part of the community as well. And if they're investing in the neighborhood, if they're benefiting from the neighborhood, they certainly should be contributing to the quality of life in the neighborhood.
Exactly.
So we certainly should focus on that. I'll certainly work with definitely Commissioner Warren. The Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet is working also to try to do a similar program to ensure that trash cans are out in front of business establishments as required by law, and we'll follow up with the enforcement.
Okay,
We are
please.
also partnering with Commerce Department and some neighborhood groups around litter enforcement in commercial areas and food establishments.
All right.
So
Yeah,
you should see
and we'll
some-
help, obviously, from our district, and I'm assuming that most council districts will be a part of anything we need to do, because, you know, it is extremely embarrassing when people come from outside of the city, and people who live in the city. When you see the fact that the city of Philadelphia, unlike any other city, just has a serious litter issue. With respect to the short dumbing cameras, and again, I want to thank you all for being out, the ability when we don't have fiber in neighborhoods, can we give us a sense of where we are?
Sure.
And the likelihood of us being in a position to throw up cameras and be able to move them, because we know how people are when, you know, like, thank you all for Ninth and, was it Ninth and Venango?
Ninth and Venango.
When we bang those folks, and my assumption is they're taking the debris somewhere else, but us having cameras that can move around. Can you tell me where we are in terms of having wireless cameras?
Sure, Council President. Richard Montanez, Deputy Commissioner of Streets. We are working with OIT and the Police Department to spec out wireless cameras that will be running on Verizon's 4G network. OIT is currently trying to finalize those specs. As soon as they are, Streets Department will purchase 10 of them for our usage.
All right, so OIT, they were in here yesterday. I wish I had them. Okay, I'll follow up and respond, because we need to be in a position to move, to be agile to address the problems as we move across our city. Let's give you this question. Street lights, LEDs, significant difference. What we did in Yorktown has made such a difference, and the people in the Yorktown community are very, very happy about the LED lights that were put in that area. We were in a position to actually have some capital dollars separate and aside from, I think, you all's budget to address that. Can you tell me where we likely will be as it relates to LED lights across the city? Sure. Time frame?
Sure, Council President.
Realistic time frame.
As you were aware, what we did in that neighborhood, we were very fortunate to secure a grant, $1 million grant, that we're doing all the lighting around the Market Frankfurt L on the east side, and we're actually expanding that program to 2 blocks on either side of the L so that we can cover that area. We're also in the process of working with the Energy Office to see what our options are to see how we can relamp the entire 150,000 lights that the city of Philadelphia has. We will be ready to come out hopefully in the next, by June, with an RFQ to then secure a vendor that will assist us to do this.
So by June, I want to make sure I'm clear, by June?
We're going to do an RFQ and then do an RFP.
And
so
will
by
that
June, we
RFQ
want to do the
talk
RFQ.
about the entire city, or?
We need to put a plan together, and we also need to finalize our costs to see how much it is. And there are options out there of how you can do it. As you probably have heard, there's multiple options. Some municipalities are doing ESCOs, other municipalities are trying bonds, things like that. We want to make sure we present City Council the right choice, and the Energy Office will be better to speak on that behalf.
All right, yeah, because we would like to, have that as part of our 5-year plan. This is a significant issue as it relates to combating crime and other quality of life issues.
In the meantime, we are still revamping the city using some of our capital funds, and we are still actively going after grants to continue the revamping.
Okay, thank you. So, SEPTA. And I got this as some prepared questions. Apparently, SEPTA has discussed adding traffic light controls to their buses, allowing buses to increase their speed by changing traffic lights as they approach, and I want to preface that appropriately. It is based on an analysis that the ridership, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is the information I got, ridership on a lot of SEPTA buses has gone down because the time frame and as it relates to timely and according to the schedule, people are not meeting that time because a whole lot of different Uber, people in lanes, all the issues associated with traffic flow. The ridership is down, and there was a discussion about the buses being able to change the lights.
So there's probably a couple things that you might be thinking about. I'm sorry.
Say
Mike
that.
Carroll, Deputy Managing Director, Office of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability. So we have actually implemented some improvements, and Rich may be able to give a little bit more detail on this, where there is essentially a device on every bus, and this will be every bus that gets procured from now until pretty much forever, which sends a signal out and lets either the signal or some central control at the traffic operations center know where it is. And then the new
Say that again. What does that mean? What you just said?
So we can track where the buses are. There's either a GPS or there's some sort of a signal emitter that shoots out a little radio signal from the bus that says, I'm here. Every new signal that we put in has the capability of detecting that signal
Okay.
And so when the bus approaches a signal, the object isn't to change the light. That's not how we do things here. We wouldn't want suddenly someone to have like 1 second of green and then the bus comes and it changes to red, because we don't feel like that's necessarily safe. But if the signal is getting ready to turn red and the bus is approaching it, it can stay green for a few more seconds to let the bus get through. So we've done that on a
So the
couple
answer is
orders.
yes.
Yes. So
All right.
we're
Short
doing,
answer is yes, buses can alter the light
correct.
in terms of the cycle.
correct. Extend the green, that's what we say.
Is that the only way it can do, is extend the green?
Well,
Or
like I
can
say,
it change the light?
we're not, go
Can
ahead,
I-
Rich.
Rich Montanez, Deputy Commissioner Street. So, Council President, currently they can only extend the green. They actually extend the green up to 10 seconds in order for them to go through the intersection. We can, and we've talked to Homeland Security, if we do need to evacuate a section of the city, we can turn those into, they can actually change the light and give us green, but that's all by Homeland Security orders. The city streets department only extends the green by 10 seconds for them now. In case of emergency, then we'll turn them all green if Homeland Security requires evacuation and we're using SEPTA to evacuate a neighborhood.
So I just want to make sure I'm sure. The capability that currently exists on the buses only allow a 10-second extension.
That is
That's
correct.
built in the technology. Can't, I said, you know what?
that
I'm
is
like
correct.
halfway down the block, that light,
And the benefits we got out of implementing this technology is that the fire department and police department are also utilizing.
I'm fine with that.
They can actually turn the lights green right away.
I'm fine. They should be able to do that. I just, Okay, that's interesting. I wasn't clear on what the response would be. I think the other questions have been answered. I'm reluctant to ask these questions, so I was sent these questions by a person who used to be a part of government, and they have this issue with respect to the signage along our streets. No parking, yes parking, this, that, and there are a lot of signs once I looked at it. And I guess we do it based on need, but there does appear to be a significant number of street signs for every imaginable reason. Has there ever been a conversation, or did anybody even think that it was problematic that we eliminate the number of actual poles and signs on a block? 'Cause it's a lot,
I do understand the sign clutter is an issue in Philadelphia. However, we need a minimum of 3 signs per block in order for it to be considered enforced or is not being held up in court. So we do need a minimum amount of signage out there. Sometimes you get a vast amount of signage depending on the different regulations in that block, which could be loading zone, handicap zones, 2-hour parking, 4-hour parking. And if you notice in Center City, the regulations change on an hourly basis. So all that has to get posted in order for us to enforce.
Yeah, we have a lot. Is there the possibility that there are signs that are outdated? Do we can remove them if we put a new reg up? We make sure that we remove any signs that are not.
The streets department does update all the signage on the street if a new regulation passes.
Okay. All right. Ms. Carroll, you wanted to add to
Yeah,
that?
just wanted to mention, we have seen in a couple other cities, New York and Los Angeles, they've tried out some consolidated signs, which reduce the amount of signage you need for parking restrictions to change over the course of the day or different hours for different days. And so that's something we're looking at, but we would have to really take that kind of on as a pilot before we were signed off on it.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon again. Two last questions. One is, are we doing a traffic study? I know we talked about this last year at this time, about a traffic study because of the congestion that's going on. Have we done a traffic study, or are we planning on doing one?
Yes, so we're involved in a study process which is focused on what we're calling Central Philadelphia. It's a little bit bigger than Center City, also University City, parts of North Philly, South Philly. The main focus right now is to do an assessment of the data that we have. So this is going to be kind of a longer term process, but the first question we need to know is, if you look at the data that the city has, PPA has, SEPTA has, other stakeholders, some folks who are involved in planning work. We want to understand what we know and how well we know what we know, and then figure out whether we need to beef up our data collection ability. Ultimately, that has two benefits. One, it helps us do better planning so that when we really think about the better ideas that other places are thinking about, we know we can implement them. But also, we're hopeful we can do more in real time. And so combining that kind of data, some of the data that we hear is out there from a smart cities perspective, with more traditional methods we have to manage traffic, manage congestion in real time. We thought that was the best way to spend our resources to stand up that analysis.
Well, my concern is that now with the traffic flow, we have bike lanes, which is fine, and now we have 20 to 25% of the items that people are purchasing over the internet. So we have all this additional trucking business, I guess, deliveries all over the city.
Right.
And that's only going to increase and put more demands. And I know other cities, for example, for deliveries have gone to, I think New York, like 12 midnight to 6 a.m. For deliveries. So I'm just thinking, those are the types of things we could do and study and implement. And we should talk to the people that are doing all the delivery. They may like it better because the streets are more open and might unclog some of our streets.
Yeah, and that kind of change, we would certainly need to coordinate with council to change some existing legislation to allow us to do that. But like I say, the data we can get to figure out who's out there, what's getting delivered and where, that'll help us make those kinds of decisions.
Well, how long does that take to figure that out?
To figure which piece out?
If we want to have delivery of goods and services from 12 midnight or whatever time we decide till 6 a.m. to free up the streets.
I feel like that's something we would want to pilot too, so we probably would look for a specific corridor to try that out. We're going to need a pretty healthy process talking to the public because some people feel very strongly about not having deliveries at night as you have vehicles backing up and moving around, the beeping and the banging and that kind of thing can be a disturbance for people. So I couldn't tell you we could pull something off like that right away, but we need to have that type of engagement. I think council has a real strong role to play in that.
Is New York doing that now?
They do it on a pilot basis. I think they have a couple different experiments they've taken on, and one of the ones that's most interesting is what they call a nighttime delivery program. One of the keys there is that they're working on the outreach with the buildings and the building operators to make sure somebody is there, because that's one of the things that's really key is when the delivery is being made, there have to be qualified people who can accept the goods. And some of the buildings have had problems finding people who are going to be there at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. So we have to think this through before we do anything.
I'll give you an example of an industry maybe we could start a pilot with would be restaurants. Because they're open at that time anyway, or they're cleaning up or whatever they're doing. At least we get all those delivery trucks off the street during the day that create a lot of the congestion.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
So I would look at restaurants. This question I'm going to ask you is on behalf of Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown. She asked me to ask this question. And it says on February 21st, a London newspaper, The Guardian, published a report on the rise in pollution in Chester County caused by our decision to send our waste to trash incineration facilities there. Some experts worry that burning plastic recycling will create a new fog of dioxins that will worsen an already alarming health situation in Chester. Nearly 4 in 10 children in the city of Chester have asthma, while the rate of ovarian cancer is 64% higher than the rest of Pennsylvania, and the lung cancer rates are 24% higher. If this was in a London newspaper about Philadelphia, how do we respond to that?
So just to kind of clarify where that probably originated, when we made the decision to for an interim solution to send our recycling there, that probably elevated, but we've always, Covana is the facility that they're referencing that's in Chester. We've always done business in terms of sending our disposal waste there. We usually average about 400 to 600 tons per day to there just our waste alone. It did increase the capacity when we temporarily sent our recyclable material, which is ending at the end of this month. Scott McGrath is our environmental planner. He works very closely with the Department of Environmental Protection. He certainly has been aware and has actually communicated on this issue, so I'm going to give him the opportunity to talk about some of the concerns that were raised. He's actually had to do an interview related to this story, so I'm going to let Scott speak on behalf.
Okay. Scott McGrath, Environmental Planning Director for Streets. Like the Commissioner said, we work very closely with Covanta and with the state. This facility has a continuous emissions and monitoring system in place. So the state actually gets all the data on their emissions standards that they have in place. And this is updated on a routine basis with the state too. So they're always checking their system and seeing what the quality of their air emissions are. I would also add that from a relative standpoint, the 200 tons a day that we're sending to that facility, that actually processes 5,000 tons of trash. So it's a relatively small amount, and plastics represent about 1% of the recycling by weight that's being delivered. So relatively speaking, it's a very small amount of material that out of the whole that's actually being processed by the facility, which has a very minimal impact from an emissions standpoint.
I mean, here's my concern is twofold. One, I want to make sure on the councilwoman's behalf that we're not creating this problem there with our stuff. And then number two, we should respond to The Guardian, which is a London publication, because everybody in London's probably reading this and thinking not too highly of Philadelphia.
Yes, actually, Covanta did provide a response to that. One of the issues that they've also found that some of the environmental groups are also using data that is old. So a lot of the data that's out there on the internet is not very current.
Are you saying the article is inaccurate?
What's that?
Are you saying the article is inaccurate?
No, it may not necessarily be inaccurate, but it may not reflect the most current information that's out there.
So just so I'm clear for the councilwoman's benefit, are we creating this issue that was in the article?
Are we creating the issue? No, that's in the article.
No.
Okay. And we have responded to the Guardian with our position.
So we weren't aware that we've received a lot of international requests because of the crisis that we're in terms of recycling. We haven't specifically seen that one in direct.
I give it to you.
Yeah, if you can forward it to us,
Well,
and
I
so
just
that
want to
we
see us
can
respond so that we look good in the eyes of
Absolutely.
the world.
Yeah, we're also very sensitive to the concerns about what's going on and where we send our trash. The EPA, the DEP also notifies us of any violations at any transfer facility that's not in compliance with any standards that's set to protect health and safety. We have not received any violations on this facility thus far in relationships to health hazards, but if we do, we would address it accordingly, and if necessary, we will redirect our trash if their plant was shut down. So those are the things that we have in place in terms of protections that we can rely on from a state agency that will give us assurances that some of the health conditions are sustainable.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Blackwell is not here. Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for your testimony
Thank you,
today.
Council President.
As always, please be prepared for callbacks at
Yes.
this point.
Thank you so much.
And again, thank you for your responsive nature.
Thank you very much, Councilman.
Thank you.
Appreciate your support.
Hold on 1 second. Councilwoman, did you have? Oh, okay. There you go.
Thank you very much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
check it out. It's a I think it's like a 4-hour, 4 or 5. Okay, I'll MapQuest it. It's at the 7th Spring. It's for Silver River or something, right? Okay, I'll check it out, and then I'll let you know. We have to be there at 1. Okay, so we're probably gonna want to push off by like 7:30. Yeah, and I'll have the. You know, I talked to Judge Oden. He's actually on the panel now. Yeah, that's all we had.
Next up, we have DHS. So, on Thursday mornings, when we start council session, I'm going to see if I can have that happen when I walk in. No chance of that. Good afternoon. Please proceed with your testimony.
Certainly. Good afternoon, President Clark and members of City Council. My name is Cynthia Figueroa. I'm the Commissioner of the City of Philadelphia's Department of Human Services. With me today is Kimberly Ali, Deputy Commissioner for Child Welfare Operations, and Christopher Seamy, Deputy Commissioner for Finance and Contracts, as well as many members of my senior team. I want to take a moment, a point of privilege, to thank and recognize the amazing DHS staff for their hard work in protecting our city's most vulnerable children. The mission of Philadelphia's DHS is to provide and promote safety, permanency, and well-being for children and youth who are at risk for abuse, neglect, and delinquency. We are pleased to report that over the last year, we have made progress in many areas of our system. This work is done in partnership with 6 community umbrella agencies, CUAs, in 10 regions throughout the city. I'm speaking today on behalf of a system that has made it through turbulent years where there was an unprecedented number of reports to our child abuse hotline because of significant changes to the Child Protective Services Law, which were implemented in 2015. We are still managing the nearly 5 years of double-digit increases with child abuse reports. Today, I'm pleased to report that the hotline reports have leveled off in the last year, and we only saw a 4% increase 1 year over year prior. But we still experienced a 70% increase overall from fiscal year 2014.
We also made huge strides in our goals to reduce the number of children entering the child welfare system. 3 years ago, we testified of a double-digit increase, 13% to be exact, in children who were placed with the department. Today, I'm pleased to report that last year, there were 9% fewer children were in placement than 1 year prior. We believe this is a sign that our strategic changes in the front end of our operations that include the hotline investigation, as well as investments in prevention services, have been successful and made an impact to decrease children placed with the department. Although I know there are continued improvements and we still face a number of challenges, I can say with confidence that we are headed in the right direction. We are improving outcomes for children and youth in both child welfare and juvenile justice. This is evidenced by the fact that 55% of children placed in a family-based setting are placed with somebody that they know in kinship care. Children and youth are being placed close to home and in the communities that they're from. 82% of children live within 10 miles of their home, and 59% live within 5 miles of their home. At 10.3% of dependent youth placed in congregate care, we are below the state average of 14%, and we're below the national average of 12%. We continue to support and advocate for more community-based alternatives to placements for youth in the juvenile justice system. We have stopped using residential providers who are not providing quality services. This is including closing intake, removing youth, and ending specific contracts. In addition, we're actively engaged with the Youth Residential Task Force led by Council Members Helen Gim and Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson. We have prioritized community-based prevention interventions for child welfare and juvenile justice so that children can remain in their communities and maintain connections and restore relationships. We are strengthening our investments in resources that prevent child abuse and neglect. Those investments align with City Council's Narrowing the Gap report. We are addressing poverty-related barriers. For example, our new partnership with Community Legal Services provides free legal support to families who need help with issues such as landlord-tenant conflicts and benefits access. The Family Empowerment Centers are 2 pilots starting next month to provide intensive case management services for high-risk families. Also, out of school time, DHS funds the majority of free or after-school programs and summer programs in Philadelphia that reach over 15,000 kids. We also invest heavily on workforce-ready programs. Last year, DHS funded 2,645 work-ready paid summer work internships. And we are also supporting the Rapid Service Response Initiative, which provides short-term concrete supports for needs and families. In the coming year, our priority is to continue to right-size our system. We are committed to safely preventing more children from being placed with DHS, safe and timely permanency, leading with reunification, continued reduction of congregate care for both dependent and delinquent youth, alignment of programs to serve children at most risk for involvement with child welfare and juvenile justice, and decreasing the amount of time children are in the system. Our challenge is to reunify families more quickly. If that's not possible, we need to move to a more permanent solution. To do this, we're enhancing our family engagement efforts, increasing our funding for rapid rehousing for reunification. At the same time, we're working to reduce delays in the adoption process. We're recruiting more foster homes for teens in tandem with our efforts to reduce congregate care. We have bolstered our recruitment efforts for foster homes that welcome teens. We have many willing folks to foster children and youth. Finding homes for teens continues to be a challenge. In closing, I just want to thank the council members for your continued support. We work closely with many of you to address constituent concerns throughout the year, and we thank you for the opportunity to present testimony today, and we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Just had a couple of questions, and first I want to thank you. You must have been listening, monitoring our testimony when you say you've been working with that Narrowing the Gap document put together by council. Can you give me a little more specifics in terms of what component
Sure.
of the
So I
document
actually,
you're interested in? Because
the handouts that we provided you, I did like a quick chart for you guys, and a lot of our services interface with barriers that are reflected as a result of poverty, but the rapid service response is a service that we have directly tied to our hotline, and so it provides concrete needs. So if it's like food, utility assistance, a shallow rent, if there's no furniture, so sometimes I know you hear from constituents, oh, there was a report because there was, the electricity got cut off, or there's no furniture. And so this allows us the ability to provide those concrete goods. So that's one initiative. We know that the out of school time, the investment that we make in after school is critical. We know the hours that can serve really in some ways as a child care or security issue for children between the hours of 3 and 6, as well as work ready. And I know a number of council members have talked about this, but we make a significant investment in youth exposure and youth access to career opportunities.
Great. Are you asking for more money for that part?
I know there's a lot of challenges that we have to look at, a lot of priorities for the city, so we want to work with the city around whatever makes sense in terms of both council and the city's budget.
Okay. You may get a positive response. Okay. So, I know.
I'm getting
See
applause from the finance department.
The budget lady over there, the finance folks here, all right. The issue around your funding, so what's the majority of your money comes from state and federal?
Yes, so Chris
What's the ratio in terms?
Yeah, sure. Christopher Simi, Deputy Commissioner for Finance. Over the past several years, our local contribution to DHS's overall budget has been around 15%.
I'm sorry, say that again?
It's about 15%. So in the current year, we have about $115 million in general fund in the budget.
Okay. Is there the potential of any of our federal, particularly the federal level, money being jeopardized as a result of some of the challenges associated with what's going on in Washington and the proposed 45, 46, what is
So
it?
45. Yeah, it's like closer to, yeah. I mean, in general, we have remained an issue that has not become a partisan issue, so we have been able to not see impacts. At the federal level, they're looking to figure out ways to actually fund additional prevention, so we actually believe that we'll retain the level of federal as well as state funding.
Okay. COOS.
Yes.
So I know couple, 2-3 years in terms of COOS, the expansion of COOS discussion and contracts. Did the decision to contract with a number of COOS, basically to some degree outsourcing some of our services, has that been proven to be a prudent decision in terms of service delivery and from a fiscal perspective?
So two things. One is it was I would say that it didn't necessarily reduce the budget. It pretty much kept us in line in terms of our funding or our spend as it relates to the state. In regards to performance, we did a lot of work. As you may have recalled, 2 years ago, we started the CUA scorecard process. And so it really created a pathway for the CUAs to improve the performance. At the time we rolled out that initiative was the same time all the Child Protective Service law changed. So we saw this huge influx at the same time we were doing a reform. I'm really pleased to say there's tremendous stability, and even the caseload number has reduced for the case managers within the CUAs. And some of the statistics that we talk about is that more kids living in their community, so moving the work from Center City downtown in one building, one office, to work happening in the community. We believe that we've seen more community-based results and the higher utilization of kin.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Chair recognizes Councilman O.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Funding, I understand, mainly comes through the state and the federal government. In that basis, is there a process where the more work you get, the more funding you get? It's pretty typical, but is that the basis?
No, so on the state level, there's what's called a need-based plan and budget. And then what draws down from the feds and the state is a combination of what's happening across the Commonwealth. So not only unique to Philadelphia, but all the counties in Pennsylvania.
Okay, so when we look at the statistics, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, because I I read the statistics, I don't know if they're accurate or not. What I've read is 91% of removal of children is not for direct abuse of children.
I mean, if you could cite the source, because that's not a statistic that I've heard in the past.
Okay.
Just in terms of that percentage, that seems incredibly high, but I'm not sure where it's.
Yeah, it can be, it could differ on how you're defining some of the terms. So I'll skip that one. If you don't know what I'm referring to, we could just skip that question. In terms of complaints, is there a method or a process if someone has a complaint about anything that is happening that they feel is not in compliance with the law? What transparency, record-keeping, accountability, follow-through is there for that process?
So I guess I'll start with the first one. If there is an issue that is believed to have been an illegal process, the city has the Inspector General's office, and so I would recommend that that's the process by which they would use. If there is a complaint that is being made regarding whether it's a case-specific or a client or a case manager, there's the Commissioner's Action Response Office, and so we have staff who manage any and all concerns, complaints, or questions.
That's within your office?
That is within my office, yes.
Okay. And do you have an opinion on closed and open courtrooms?
So there is a very specific judicial, so I wouldn't offer my personal opinion. I would follow what the Commonwealth has determined what's appropriate for juvenile law.
Okay. And then finally, in interacting with the police department, is it the routine process then when the police conduct an investigation, they contact DHS for a portion of DHS's investigation?
So not having the specifics of a particular case, I would say that we work in tremendous partnership with the police department. Sometimes we're bringing the police department into a case because they're unaware of an issue that's happened because abuse has been reported to us, but it's clearly a criminal offense, and so the police department has to be engaged. That's most likely reflected in our special victims unit where there's sex abuse cases, but there are a number of unfortunate matters that happen in Philadelphia where there is a crime committed and children may have been exposed, involved, or a direct victim of that crime, and then we're often called and we work in parallel, in tandem. We share information with each other as it's appropriate as it relates to the investigation.
In some cases, I've been made aware, and in some cases I have verified, in others I have not, that, for example, when there is a complaint, an allegation, a criminal allegation made to the police, in some cases, the police's, their response is, there is not an investigation because the allegations were determined to be unfounded by DHS. Is that anything you're familiar with?
I think it would be hard to speculate without the specifics.
So you're not familiar with those type of situations?
Like I was saying, I think I would be speculating on a case that I don't have the specifics of. So, meaning if the police were waiting to find out whether or not an abuse was indicated in order to move forward with their investigation of a case, I would have to talk to the police department about that.
Okay, for example, a child alleges that she has suffered abuse or has, something like that. And that complaint is made to a police officer. And when the parent tries to follow through what is going on with the investigation, they are told there is no investigation because DHS determined the allegations to be unfounded. Does that ever happen, to your knowledge?
Again, I can't answer yes or no because I don't know what specific case we're talking about, but what I can say is that we sometimes have cases that are brought to our attention by the police department because the family member might not know to call our hotline, so they call 911. It doesn't constitute police involvement, but it would constitute a DHS investigation, so we might result in an investigation. If it is in any nature sex abuse related, that would require a forensic interview, and if it was determined to be unfounded, that would the police would also be notified of that process. If it's unfounded and there's no evidence of sex abuse, then the police likely would not proceed on an investigation.
So if a child, for example, brought in an allegation of rape, and the child was in DHS custody or
I'm sorry, was or was not?
was,
Okay.
is it possible that DHS would then conduct the examination or investigation and then report to the police that it's founded or unfounded?
So I can have Kim talk about it, but it's a very involved process with the special victims.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Kimberly Ali. I'm Deputy Commissioner for Child Welfare Operations. Councilman, when we receive an allegation of rape of a child or a young person, the report is handled by Childline, who sends it to the Department of Human Services, and at the same time we gather the information, notification also goes to law enforcement to put law enforcement on notice that a young person has made allegations of rape. We have a coordinated response in which we work with Special Victims Unit, the District Attorney, our Child Advocacy Center, who does forensic sex abuse investigations, and we also have DHS investigators that are co-located at our Safety Collaborative on Huntington Park. We bring that young person in for a forensic interview in which a representative from our Child Advocacy Center will interview the young person to gather information about the allegations. We recognize that it is very traumatic for a young person to be interviewed when there is such a serious allegation. Therefore, behind a two-way mirror, you have the Special Victims Unit, you have the District Attorney, you have DHS social workers, and then the interview is led by a representative from our Child Advocacy Center. At that point, young people may or may not make a disclosure. If the young person doesn't make the disclosure, what we will do is determine whether or not what additional services if the young person needs. If the young person makes a disclosure at that location, we also have a medical suite, and at that medical suite we have doctors from Children's Hospital of Philadelphia as well as St. Chris Hospital of Philadelphia so that the young person can be evaluated medically, and then we also offer behavioral health support for that young person as well. Again, just recognizing the sensitive nature of the allegation and not wanting a young person to be re-traumatized.
Thank you very much. My final point. So if there's a medical report that in detail describes a sexual penetration of a child under the age of 6, that the child states has gone on for 2 years, that statement recorded by doctors in front of Philadelphia police, social workers, there is almost no way that that report would not have been investigated in the manner you stated. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Dom.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Few questions. How many juveniles are currently being held at the Juvenile Justice Center?
Today, so it fluctuates. I believe today we were at 118. 118, yes.
Okay, in 2017, I think it said 7 out of 10 CUAs received grades of D. What are the current grades today?
So the current grades as of the fall were C and C pluses, and I'm glad to say that as we're at the 6-month mark, we're moving closer to B minuses, but we're definitely more in the average, which even the length of time of the reform, I think we've made tremendous progress in a short time.
Do we have any that are C or D right now?
So we had one who was still struggling a little bit, but has been able to move up considerably and actually made the most progress percentage-wise, and we believe they'll be at, will be at the C level in the
That's
coming.
good. Okay, thank you. In the public property budget detail, which is a small question, but it shows that DHS paid about $560,000 to rent space at 300 East Hunting Park for the Public Safety Collaborative.
Yes.
This year, it seems you're requesting $1.2 million to rent space there. And we're just curious why we're appropriating twice as much as we're for rent this year.
Councilman, we can look into that. I'm not aware of that cost. Yeah,
Okay.
we can follow up on that.
So
That's
that,
fine.
just to clarify, that was the center that we were just talking about that co-locates the police, the district attorney, Philadelphia Children's Alliance, and DHS staff. So I don't know if there's a manner in which all of the rent was reflected, but we're all together in this space.
Just look at it and let us know.
Okay, yeah.
The budget detail shows your department is appropriating about $14 million for Class 200 towards professional services for IT. Any reason why Human Services doesn't consolidate their IT services under the Office of Information Technology?
So one of the huge factors for us is that we have 1,500 employees and 500 plus case managers in the field, and a lot of our information is reliant on data. It's also very unique to child welfare and the specialization of that. So much like we have our own HR and we have our own finance, it's a very large, complex department and has been incredibly beneficial for us. The professional services in that area is slightly higher because we're in the process of building out a new system, and we're pretty far along in that process. So it's a little higher than it normally would reflect.
Do you think there'd be a benefit? 'Cause it seems like we have a pretty good Office of Information Technology. Do you think there'd be a benefit in collaborating with them?
Well, we collaborate pretty considerably with them. So I think that they enjoy a very strong working relationship in the same way that we work with other city departments where we have an arm of that within our department.
Let me answer the second question to that. Would there be a benefit with them getting more involved and saving some of that $14 million?
If I can just jump in, I think we do work very closely with them. One of the key things to keep in mind with all of our IT spending is we receive a significant amount of state support through what's called the IT grant. So in order to draw down that money, we need to keep those costs very explicitly segregated from non-child welfare related costs.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here today. Keep up
Thank
the good
you.
work. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you,
President.
Good, Councilman? Good. Okay, thank you very much. One last question. Why didn't we realize any fiscal benefits from outsourcing to COOs? Because traditionally, benefits and some of the other things associated with the private sector are lower.
So I think what's important to note about the utilization of CUAs is we always had a dual system. So we had a DHS worker and a private agency. So the utilization and contracting of a private provider was not new. It's just that we bundled the expectations so that there was one case manager. It also happened at a time where, while we moved our work to the CUAs, we had this huge increase. So I would say our front-end services, the hotline and investigations, is a much larger operation than it was prior. So that's also created some of the shifts. So I just want to be clear, it's not like we were doing it completely on our own. We were always had a partnership with the private community.
But there was no increase in our...
I can get the exact numbers.
We didn't save money, but it
We
didn't
did not
cost us
save
more.
money. We did
But
not
it
save
did
any
not
money.
cost us more. Okay. All right, well, I want to thank you almost. Councilwoman Gim, just in the nick of time.
Thank you very much, Council President. First of all, I want to thank Commissioner, you and your team for being really proactive on a whole host of issues that we've been working on together for a long time. And I wanted to ask a little bit about your budget and whether it accounts for changes that you expect to come out of the recommendations from the task force. So we've been working together on this task force to reduce residential youth placements.
It's had tremendous work and could not have come at a more important time. But is the budget looking ahead to taking a look for any of these potential recommendations? And do you feel like it's responding to that? Yes, so very specifically, I think even at the start of our work, we actually put in a host of things. So they're reflected, and the new things that we asked for the state is alternatives to detention, so to increase the GPS monitoring so that we could put 300 additional youth, so that means we could keep more kids in the community engaged in probation but not in a placement. We also had put in to support graduated response. We have currently what's called an evening reporting center, and so we requested the expansion of an additional reporting center, and we also, for the expansion and start of what's called a discharge reporting center, and that's to support high-risk youth that are returning from residential placements so that they continue to get support in the community. And then the most exciting one that we're looking is which will require a partnership with the school district, is a day center. So develop a community-based program that's really an alternative education site for delinquent youth. So instead of, very similar to some of the things that we've heard from our partners in New York, that they would be able to attend school physically in Philadelphia. They could reside either in a foster home or their own home, but go to one school site together.
That's great. You know, one of the things I noticed between, you know, the closures of some of the different facilities, particularly around Vision Quest and Glen Mills, that there's been a reduction in that amount. Now, it's about $300 and some thousand. Are you repurposing it for things like this, or is this additional money in the budget?
So Chris could talk a little bit in terms of how we work with the state in terms of what we can draw down, because different contracting and different services are a different match. And so what represents residential dollars doesn't necessarily translate to what a allocation is on a prevention side. So it's not like a swap out one for one. Our other experiences is we've seen growth in different areas or different costs. It doesn't necessarily allow us to redirect all the funds, but certainly allows us to tell the state on an annual basis. So we it's not like starting from scratch, but we tell the state, these are our needs for the coming year. This is our intent of how we want to spend child welfare dollars, juvenile justice dollars, et cetera. But Chris, if you want to.
Yeah, I'll just say that when it comes to the funding that we use for placement, so paying for days of care for our children and youth, because so much of our funding is state and federal, we're very limited in terms of the flexibility. So if we have a reduction on one side, we can't necessarily just move that funding into a different type of programming. We have some flexibility, but it's fairly limited. So to the extent that we do see cost savings on those sides, we can't necessarily just plug them into other things without getting state approval ahead of time.
And are those conversations happening with the state, that we're seeing these kinds of reductions going on, and that we're looking to create a community-based program with the school district, that we would like to see more youth and monitoring?
Yeah, just so in order for us to even present this to the city, we have to have some relative assurance at the state, since they're the larger funder of this. And then in regards to your last point, one of the negotiations when they're looking at our budget is, if you're reducing one cost, does this allow me to say yes to this? So there is, while it's not one for one, I think it gives them the opportunity to say, can we cover this cost related to Philadelphia when they're asking us for this service?
Okay, thank you. Again, I have so appreciated DHS's work in committing to reducing the number of youth in congregate care facilities, and I know that we're looking forward to that. We've actually seen it happen, but as we, in the budget, one of the questions that I wanted to ask is that the targets for FY19 and FY20 still seem to be greater, or seem to imply that it's going to be greater than the current year, so it just says less than or equal to 12% greater than the current rate. Is that, how
can we adjust the numbers so that they more accurately reflect what we're trying to do? Or if you could just explain those numbers a little bit clearer.
So part of also what we're trying to do is make sure that we don't reduce something that subsequently is going to hurt us financially. If we project something to the state that demonstrates that we're going to have a huge reduction and then we don't move them through in the way that we want to, that's something that we have to be considering. And all placement also constitutes the utilization of foster care. So we're not just talking about
Okay.
residential when you're looking at placement costs related on the dependent side.
And we've, I think we talked about this a little bit, but on the foster care, the dependent side, those young people are going to congregate care, foster care facilities, or does that include individualized foster?
Individualized. So those homes are so when you look at that, their individual homes are licensed.
So when it says percentage of dependent placement population in congregate care, that can include one child and one family?
What page are you looking at? So
We pulled it just by it. Do you have the page?
okay.
Oh, I think it's from the test. Is it from your testimony?
Oh, from the submitted. So that would be group home congregate care.
Group home congregate care. And I think that's the question that I'm
Got it.
trying to find out. Like, is there, in the way that we've been aggressively reducing it on the delinquent side, how are we working to keep our youth closer to home, non-institutionalized settings? You know, we've increased the amount of money going to foster care families. And so how is that having an impact, and how can I see that reflected?
So the biggest need for us is another request we did make to the state, which is foster care recruitment, particularly older youth. I said in my verbal testimony, we generally don't have a difficult time placing younger children. We do have a very difficult time placing older youth who are presenting with normal adolescent behavior, but nonetheless can be of a challenge for foster care or a kin provider. So I think that in terms of one of the things that we shared with you all is a graph like this that shows we have a host of different strategies, and besides foster care recruitment, we've been pushing and strengthening our utilization of kin. And kin really in a broad sense of a term, not just blood kin. And then there's a process that we've been using for a number of years, which is the commissioner's approval process. We've met with both the law department and our team to just revisit like a cultural shift too, to make sure that folks know that absolutely our use of congregate care should be because there's a behavioral health or a health need, or there's absolutely no options.
I mean, you know, I know you and I have a commitment to see that number go down, so we should just keep talking and
Yes,
working together.
Our motto is 9 and below. We're at 10.3, which is the lowest we've ever been on dependent. The state's percentage is 14% and the national is 12%. So Philadelphia is experiencing below the national average, but we're very much committed to,
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. And I have a couple more questions, if that's okay. So one of the things that your report, Improving Outcomes for Children, has been flagging is the need to address truancy and reduce entry into the formal child welfare system. So, you know, the state laws are starting to evolve. We now have Act 138 that's requiring the school district to be a partner in all of this. So can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been working with the school district, particularly around Act 138? This is one of the reasons why we've been pushing on the counselors, the social worker program that we're doing with CBH and others. But I'd like to hear from you a little bit what your experience has been.
So we have been doing, I just want to say we experience a really great partnership with the school district. Part of that is we work with them on a daily basis because there are so many children shared between the two systems. And so our ability to really make sure that we're working in the best way possible. So with the introduction of Act 138, we did a lot of planning with the district because it was going to be a pretty significant burden to them because it was an unfunded mandate in terms of the requirements around, in order now to refer to child welfare, there's a lot of benchmarks or indicators that the
school district had to demonstrate physically in order for that referral to happen. And so we instituted really that process, which is that we would not accept referrals from school districts and from our school district unless there was evidence that a truancy conference had been had and a truancy plan had been developed. In order to support the district, because that was a heavy lift, we're actually been running a pilot with our truancy providers, our case managers that do work in the community, where they're doing the support. They're supporting that first tier work in the schools with the school district. And so we're supporting, because we've always funded a level of prevention truancy work. And so we've actually seen really significant gains in the sense that we're seeing the numbers reduce as regards to the referrals as just a straight truancy issue.
Okay, that's hopeful.
It is hopeful. We're also tracking that, so I'm hoping that maybe by late fall or winter, we'd be able to talk some numbers in terms of how many referrals came through that project and how many youth were and were not referred.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I mean, you know, this, in the last year and a half or so, we've been sending some of our staff to truancy court, just to pay attention to what's happening on the ground.
Yep.
And, you know, I'd be curious about how much money DHS is spending on truancy prevention.
So it's about $8.5 million.
8.5, and as a percentage?
As a percentage of our prevention money, it's probably like
Small.
10,
Yeah, it's 12%.
12%?
12%
10 to
maybe,
12%.
for the total prevention budget, yeah.
And have you, you know, as we're kind of observing some of the impact in truancy court, I guess I'm wondering if you've, like, how you evaluate the efficacy of the contracts that you push out for the entities that are supposed to handle it, because we hear lots of different things that happen, including, you know, breakdowns in communications and other types of things. And you know, I assume, obviously every contract provider has a contract. There are metrics that have to be met. But given that it is a significant percentage of the budget, given that it's like an important area that we have to evolve and refine, I was curious about whether you've thought about taking a more aggressive evaluation of the efficacy of the truancy prevention work and seeing if, like, a third-party provider, or if there's somebody else that might be helpful in navigating some of the issues that we're sometimes
Yes, so
seeing.
there have been a few changes on the prevention contracting side. One is that we're treating them much more like the providers on the child welfare side, which is that we have an expectation now that they go through some of the similar training. Before, it was like there wasn't necessarily a clarity on the expectations of the safety and other issues that we want to make sure providers receive similar training. So that was one major change. This new project, or I hate using the term pilot, but really what we're doing with the school district in terms of having, we're in over 112 schools where we have providers that are doing these supports. I think the opportunity to evaluate this very new way further upstream process of looking at it from a prevention standpoint, the intention is to be prevention. I think the challenge is when you have a youth that has much more complex issues and they are not attending school even with interventions, what's the right service? And I think that we've figured out the upstream service, and I think the question is there something new or different for kids who are missing like 40, 50 plus days and may have other presenting issues that have to be considered.
Yeah, no, I think that that's exactly right, that, you know, as IOC showed, you know, there's an entry level, but it's clear that truancy is just a symptom as opposed to like the cause. And so if we have these truancy prevention services and contracts with providers, are we making clear that there's some kind of a link to when we see these deep problems that are going on? How are we pushing it a little further, maybe moving it out of truancy prevention and into some other kind of
and I think something
service
that we probably can do a much better job of is figuring out how do we better link that prevention piece to a much more intensive support.
Yeah, okay. We have large numbers of youth who are aging out of foster care every year, and they may not be able to be reunified with a family. So what kinds of efforts and goals does DHS have to improve either reunification or stability, and then
in particular to get them some supports. I was really excited to hear, for example, with our planning department, that we are looking to potentially pilot shallow rent subsidies, and that this, one of the conversations to be had is whether we can match it up with particularly vulnerable populations in our city. And I am always worried about young people who age out of foster care because they have support services and then they just end. And that they're based on age and not necessarily by whether there's stability and a coordinated effort to graduate them into, independence. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Kimberly Ali, Deputy Commissioner for Child Welfare Operations. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
One of our big pushes is really around making sure that young people, when they transition from the child welfare system, that they have a connection with a caring and loving adult. Hence why we are pushing extremely hard our efforts around permanency, specifically reunification, as well as adoption or legal guardianship. What's up?
Yeah, we'll do this one, and then we'll do a callback. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I'll restate what I said around the department's push is really around permanency, because we recognize that young people need a caring adult in their life. So our push around foster care recruitment for teenagers is one that we know would help achieve young people to be more successful. In addition, we have an Achieving Independence Center that's located right at Broad and Master Street, and it's a one-stop shop for our young people aged 14 years of age or older, in which they are able to obtain life skills, again, to help them with self-sufficiency. So they do employment readiness, resume writing, there's a lot of social skills, so they're around young people who are also in the foster care system, so that they have some shared experience. The other thing that we are making sure that we do for older youth is making sure that their voices are heard at our family team conferencing table so that they can help with their plan in terms of transition. And then finally, we are taking a hard look at young people who are placed in SIL, so supervised independent living, in which they have an apartment of their own, just to make sure that the young people who are placed in those apartments actually can live on their own and they're able to afford the rent post their discharge from the child welfare system. So we also assist with rental assistance just to make sure that the young person is able to transition appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, I know that DHS has a number of really great programs. I think I'm looking for the outcomes. So like, what percentage of kids are who are aging out of foster care end up in this type of facility, and where are the gaps? So like, who is unstable? What numbers are we talking about? What are the primary
And I just want
problems?
to say this is something that we've been actually talking about quite a bit internally, and so we are doing a deeper dive in terms of who are the older youth who are aging out, to look at whether or not do the services we have match their needs. And so I just saying we don't have a recipe right now for the answers in terms of how we can do better, but we're very committed to it and happy to work with you or talk further about what are some ideas in which to support older youth. So we don't have, the numbers that we have remained consistent, but they're around 200 youth that age out without a permanent plan.
That's helpful to know.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we may just ask if DHS might do a callback.
You can work that out with the council president.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, this committee will stand in recess until Tuesday, April 29, 2019 at 10 a.m. What, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, April 23rd, 2019 at 10 a.m. We'll reconvene in room 400 City Hall. Thank you.